無盡星際，細數聖經啟示錄嘅點滴，揭開人類時代千古謎團嘅面紗，閃耀創造主嘅威榮。宇宙間互繫不息，飄越光年，亦猶如時間表，記載神藉啟示錄俾人嘅警告。3000多年前，摩西十災，更遠古嘅挪亞大洪水，只因為一顆神秘嘅星體 Planet X 嘅循環接近。箴言8章提到：智慧豈不呼叫，聰明豈不發聲？天地間有邊個願意聽神嘅聲音、神嘅警告呢？
而星際間像輝映，回味閃爍着神心境，眾聲眾聲述說主的神聖。年少世中問過多少究竟，生命原是活影，早印在繁星。誰聽慈愛創造神大名之聲？
願我神今傾聽，眾地去。
Planet X 被不同古文明所記載，卻被現代人類刻意隱藏。今日佢嘅再次接近，使地球爆發各種如摩西、挪亞時代嘅毀滅性災殃，成為人類嘅末後警告。聖經提及挪亞的日子怎樣，人子降臨也要怎樣。天就挪移，好像書卷被捲起來，山嶺海島都被挪移離開本位。
願我神今傾聽，眾地去天裂冷風機，從山海變遷灰與形，全確信尋着你，龍塵地裏有主聲幫給我道理。永定意跟着你蹤影，為你傾心傾我命，心極處現仰望呼應。
喺呢個逼近末後災難審判之時，星際啟示錄將會洗去世界嘅種種歪謬，展現人類真正嘅答案。
上星期，日華牧師繼續以答問方式分享2012信息嘅內容。問題1：新約聖經提及亞波倫呢一個人物，其實喺撰寫聖經嘅時候，使徒係咪清楚知道呢一啲神話嘅故事呢？答案係嘅，因為當時代嘅人要理解呢啲書籍，保羅一定理解當時盛行嘅希臘神話，因此佢喺帖撒羅尼迦後書提到亞波羅呢一個字眼，而約翰則喺啟示錄提到亞巴頓同埋亞波倫。星宿係神安放在天，而當中嘅神話同埋解釋必定係嚟自亞當，只不過洪水過後靠着餘下嘅8人流傳落去，因此必定不及一直旁觀嘅撒旦清楚。所以撒旦以墮落天使嘅身份嚟到人類面前，教導人類瑪雅年曆神話故事，但係當中摻雜咗敵基督嘅謊言，例如將俄塞里斯說成係主耶穌等等。Freemason 同埋天主教亦都係因着墮落天使嘅資訊，並且因着事件嘅應驗，讓佢哋去信服。例如哥倫布發現新大陸之前，英國教堂裏面已經有新大陸獨有嘅植物品種嘅雕刻。由於當時冇聖經密碼，所以 Freemason 信服墮落天使嘅資訊，以為超越聖經，因此 Freemason 嘅總統們亦都貶低聖經。佢哋唔知道所有嘅事情其實早已記載喺聖經當中。約翰喺啟示錄嘅預言中引用神話故事人物嘅名稱，所以呢一個一定唔係虛構嘅故事。亞波倫唔係神話，而係陰間上來嘅敵基督，喺地上擁有獸嘅身體。呢一個身體雖然冇人嘅靈魂，但係應該有但支派嘅 DNA。但係中文聖經嘅翻譯者冇呢一方面嘅理解，所以 將保羅所寫嘅帖撒羅尼迦後書嘅經文譯作沉淪之子，代替阿波羅嘅名字。但係其實亞巴頓同埋亞波倫都係同一個名字。墮落天使將污染咗嘅神話去欺騙 Freemason， 所以美國大國仔有各種嘅神話大集合，包括瑪雅、金字塔、埃及、荷魯斯，仲有鳳凰復活。而呢一個神話亦都會喺呢幾年間變成歷史事實，就係美金變成廢紙。除咗亞當之外，以諾書亦都提到將發生嘅事情，當中嘅 Watcher 觀察者就係墮落天使。以諾書早喺啟示錄未寫成之前已經提及將來被捆綁嘅天使將來會從無底坑再次上嚟，並且為咗製造一個可以讓墮落天使住入去嘅身體，墮落天使同人、野獸甚至係植物苟合，誕生唔同嘅軀體。呢一個就係希臘神話當中人同埋神交合所誕生嘅各種生物 Demigod， 其中之一就係大力士 Hercules， 佢統管地上嘅人，並且喺神話當中擔着2根柱子，並且推倒。古代所有嘅地方，不論係亞洲、歐洲、美洲或者係幾落後嘅地方，黃道12宮都係分成同樣數量嘅組別，名字同埋其他嘅嘢亦都係一致。呢啲嘅民族喺冇交通工具嘅情況下，仍然獲得相同嘅資訊。再者，除咗星宿之外，例如蘇美人突然有咗完整嘅文字、年曆、科技、宗教同埋星座系統，所以種種嘅資料必定係嚟自同一個來源，就係亞當。只不過當中有一啲係被墮落天使扭曲咗，而 Freemason 亦都只係藉着墮落天使而解通亞當一部分所知嘅資料。當佢哋喺歷史上做咁多嘅神秘地標，包括華盛頓參照處女座、火星 Cydonia， 甚至國會山莊放置根基石嘅時候，亦都係喺與處女座排成一線嘅當日行禮。當敵基督統治時，呢一啲地標就成為說服人類甚至係基督徒嘅證據，說服人哋呢一個係美國嘅使命。咁樣 Freemason 就可以成為世人嘅首領。原因佢哋以為敵基督就係主耶穌，所以做好多嘅事情去迎接佢。佢哋看美國為 ISIS， 為敵基督提供生育機能，所以美國國會最頂嘅係一位女神像，並且聖彼得大教堂都係圓拱形建築，代表子宮，對面嘅係放箭碑。而一個女人馱着另一隻獸，就係敵基督與墮落天使嘅軀體，係喺羅馬天主教嘅知情下由美國誕生出嚟嘅。呢一個女人所代表嘅信仰大淫婦就係羅馬天主教，將來佢使全世界嘅信仰大合一，佢所誕下嘅都係淫婦嘅子孫。此外 Doom of the Rock 亦都係對比美國， Doom 就係美國嘅身份，並且飛船亦都稱為亞波羅，到處尋找 Raphaim 嘅墳墓，以收集細胞同埋屍體。再者 Freemason 嘅前身係聖路姆士，佢哋曾經擁有埃及、耶路撒冷，喺嗰度發現 Osiris 嘅棺材。Freemason 嘅著作 Secret Teachings for All Ages， 歷史上最秘密嘅教導一書提及，終有一天人類將會知道金字塔之下係 Osiris 嘅棺材，並且 Osiris 會從當中復活。美國係淫婦，原因佢本來許配俾神，卻係奉獻咗俾敵基督。此外，拉線到自由神像所坐落嘅紐約，亦都與大淫婦同埋2個審判有關。原因紐約係除耶路撒冷之外最多猶太人嘅地方。正如第2次世界大戰時冇返去耶路撒冷嘅人，神看待佢哋係死不足惜。同樣呢一啲唔返耶路撒冷嘅紐約猶太人，神亦都會視佢哋為大淫婦。所以從不同嘅角度，包括猶太人、基督教、獸、ISIS、拉線嘅概念去睇，皆證明美國就係大淫婦，並且敵基督出嚟之餘，亦都會製造出超級士兵，成為敵基督嘅軍隊。問題2，神創造天上嘅黃道12宮，啟示錄預言處女座會誕生一個男孩，就係末後被提嘅教會。但係同時間，撒旦卻係用美國去誕生大淫婦。咁樣共濟會係咪掌握咗神作事嘅部分，利用美國誕生敵基督嘅再臨呢？答案係，首先就如以色列，歷年內神都係對以色列又愛又恨。 處女座雖然係對比美國，但係裡面牽涉到一段長時間，當中包括好多嘢。啟示錄12章，神以天上對比地上嘅概念，告訴神對教會愛嘅部分，至於恨嘅部分，就係藉着世代流傳嘅神話，亞當被扭曲嘅資料。所以當黃道12宮對比地上歷史時，唔能夠單看短短10至20年，只不過啟示錄專描述最後7年，就係婦人懷孕時7年大災難開始，當嬰孩出世之後，就係最後嘅3年半。但係如果將呢一啲對比之前200-300年所發生嘅事件，就要從天上嘅星座以年份標示出嚟。例如 Freemason 將水星、金星同埋火星等嘅運行軌跡一一記錄落嚟，組成5角星，就係金星與地球相遇嘅夾角。原因 Freemason 唔係迷信當中嘅力量，而係當中嘅軌跡代表事情嘅發生。啟示錄標示出特定嘅時間，而美國嘅大淫婦亦都只係 Freemason 一群人，但係大部分嘅美國平民亦都係非常愛主嘅基督徒，所以神亦都喺美國誕生復興，正如7年大災難嘅後3年半無依人嘅時間。總結感言部分，現時已經進入2012總解話信息。聖獸係神喺歷史完結之後，再拎到亞當嘅時代，記載神嘅手段，所以亞當知道神話當中嘅秘密並不意外。由於歷史已經定咗，因此 Freemason 唔能夠改變歷史，但係藉着聖獸知道事情發生嘅時間，因此可以藉着預知而發財，甚至係統治世界。神讓我哋知道呢一啲歷代歷世基督徒都唔知道嘅資料，解開好多千古之謎，原因係為咗一個更偉大嘅目的。Freemason 係被墮落天使嘅謊言所欺騙，所以 Freemason 唔係全知。佢哋好似尼布甲尼撒王一樣，希望知道未解之謎嘅答案。例如，佢哋花數2億萬嘅金錢去拍攝火星 Cydonia 嘅位置，找出當中嘅意義。但係撒旦為咗欺騙住佢哋，因此唔會解釋真正嘅意義。就如但以理幫助尼布甲尼撒王解夢，我哋嘅呼召就係解開但以理書所封住咗嘅秘密，解釋啟示錄。但以理書2章46至47節，當時尼布甲尼撒王俯伏在地，向但以理下拜，並且吩咐人給他奉上供物和香品。王對但以理說：你既能顯明這奧秘的事，你們的神誠然是萬神之神，萬王之主，又是顯明奧秘事的。尼布甲尼撒王同埋法老都係當時最強嘅國家，但以理同埋約瑟卻係能夠成為佢哋嘅答案。同樣，現時最強嘅國家亦都係共濟會。但以理嘅書卷被封印嘅原因，就係將來同一事件會發生多一次。當我哋能夠解明呢一啲奧秘時，即使係歷史上嘅王者，亦都會心悅誠服。以賽亞書60章1至3節，興起發光，因為你的光已經來到，耶和華的榮耀發現照耀你。看啊，黑暗遮蓋大地，幽暗遮蓋萬民，耶和華卻要顯現照耀你，他的榮耀要現在你身上，萬國要來就你的光，君王要來就你發現的光輝。呢一個就係主耶穌所提及喺末後審判嘅日子，所羅門嘅智慧將會再出現。今個星期，一華牧師繼續分享2012信息。
咁既然呢，即係由牧師我哋係可以話我哋教會承接咗呢個神所俾我哋呢個4794嘅定命呢，就係要去帶領唔單止我哋自己本身，並且係全世界所有一啲愛主嘅基督徒呢，去預備進入呢個7年大災難當中，成為一個無依人嘅師傅啦。由牧師你都即係曾經講過呢，其實即係無依人呢個字呢，原文就係麻衣呢個字，就即係舊約當中即係祭司着嗰件衫嗰個物料。咁其實呢度當中其實會唔會隱藏咗一啲嘅啟示咧？
會啊，因為我哋其實開始講11嘅秘密嘅時候咧，7嘅秘密嘅時候咧，其實隱藏咗一個嘅事實嚟嘅。因為11嘅秘密係乜嘢？記唔記得？我哋講係講緊 DNA 嘅陰謀啊嘛，就係其實簡單嚟講咧，11嘅秘密就係講出咧關於佢想改造人嘅 DNA。11其實就係人嘅 DNA，而事實上因為改造咗呢個 DNA 嘅話咧，佢就污染咗呢個電咧，神嘅靈就唔會住喺人嘅身體度噶嘛。
分享咗差不多4年嘅2012榮耀盼望信息裏邊，日華牧師曾經分享到有關聖經中數字11嘅秘密。自古以嚟，天上嘅星宿被造都係為咗述說神嘅救贖計劃。而黃道12宮嘅雙子座，佢嘅代表符號就係一對孖生兄弟，或係2根柱子。呢2根柱子外形同數字11一樣。然而喺神話傳說裏邊，雙子座就係講述一對孖生兄弟嘅故事。佢哋本應係和睦同居，後嚟卻相咬相吞，變成一正一邪，一個聖潔，一個不潔。當你仔細查考聖經，就會巧合咁發現，聖經裏邊每逢與11有關嘅章節或者係書卷，都係跟雙子、正與邪嘅相爭、聖殿、2根銅柱、2個見證人、所羅門、DNA， 甚至啟示錄嘅2個毛衣人等等嘅秘密有關。例如聖經裏邊嘅第11卷書就係列王記下，係記載建立聖殿同埋2根柱嘅所羅門一生嘅事蹟。聖經裏邊嘅第22卷書22就係2×21，係所羅門晚年時候所寫嘅雅歌。聖經第33卷書係彌迦書，呢卷書係講喺末後日子神嘅殿係要點樣嘅被建立。聖經嘅第44卷書使徒行傳係記載主耶穌建立咗佢嘅殿，就係教會。聖經第55卷書提摩太後書提到保羅將敬虔嘅奧秘話俾提摩太知，教佢成為神殿裏邊嘅柱子，成為無愧嘅工人。聖經嘅第66卷書啟示錄提到光明與黑暗、正與邪嘅最後相爭。又例如創世記第11章記載靈鹿帶領世人建立巴別塔，成為人類喺洪水後罪惡嘅起源，對比亞伯拉罕嘅出現，成為人類救主嘅根源。出埃及記第11章一面係記載神擊殺埃及長子呢個神蹟，另一面就係逾越節紀念神嘅長子。利未記第11章全章都係說明潔淨同埋唔潔淨嘅。11章常常形容2個王，佢哋嘅善同惡。例如整個列王記上都係記載所羅門嘅生平，但第11章就記載所羅門犯罪。無獨有偶，撒母耳記下第11章係記載大衛點樣犯罪。箴言第11章就係講善與惡對比嘅箴言。以賽亞書第11章就係講述主耶穌基督嘅出處係耶西嘅根所生嘅枝子。而相對但以理書第11章就用全章記載敵基督嘅出處。羅馬書第11章就記載咗呢2根嘅枝子，一根係預表以色列嘅原橄欖枝，另一根係代表教會嘅野橄欖。聖經中2呢個數字係代表見證，而2等於1+1。希伯來書第11章正正係記載信心為人榜，聖經中信心為人美好嘅見證。最後聖經第66卷書啟示錄嘅第11章係講2個毛衣人，佢哋同心合意作神嘅見證人，可以隨時隨意用各種嘅災殃攻擊神嘅敵人，甚至從死裏復活，被提到神嘅寶座嗰度。當中數字11其實代表咗人類嘅 DNA， 因為人類嘅 DNA 嘅外形有如2根柱子，亦同樣係代表所羅門聖殿前嘅2根柱。所羅門聖殿前嘅2根柱分別名為亞根同波亞斯。亞根原文嘅意思係神嘅旨意，而波亞斯原文係神嘅能力，意思係當人行傳神嘅旨意，就能夠得着神嘅能力。而呢對23肘高嘅柱子，亦係預表人類 DNA 中23對嘅染色體，因為人類 DNA 嘅外形就如同一對柱子一樣。當我哋行傳神嘅旨意，神就會為我哋打開 DNA 嘅鎖，生出第3條嘅 DNA， 人就能夠得着神嘅能力。所以真正嘅聖殿並唔係人手所做嘅殿宇，因為偉大嘅神根本唔會住喺人用金、銀、銅、鐵、泥所建成嘅建築物，而係住喺佢最偉大嘅創造，擁有神形象嘅人類嘅身體裏邊。使徒行傳7章46至48節，大衛在神面前蒙恩，祈求為雅各的神預備居所，卻是所羅門為神造成殿宇，
其實至高者並不住人手所造的。馬可福音14章58節，我們聽見他說，我要拆毀這人手所造的殿，3日內就另造一座不是人手所造的。但以理書2章45節，你既看見非人手作出來的一塊石頭從山而出，打碎金銀銅鐵泥，那就是至大的神把後來必有的事給王指明。這夢準是這樣，這講解也是確實的。所以喺聖經裏邊，神所要重建嘅聖殿就係新約教會，亦係所羅門聖殿所預表嘅。哥林多前書6章19節，豈不知你們的身子就是聖靈的殿嗎？這聖靈是從神而來，住在你們裏頭的，並且你們不是自己的人。而神嘅聖殿都係按照神喺天上嘅樣式而建造嘅，所以只有純正同埋真正嘅人類先至能夠成為神嘅聖殿，並且信主同埋承受救恩。希伯來書8章5節，他們供奉的是本是天上使的形狀和影像，正如摩西將要做帳幕的時候，蒙神警戒他說，你要謹慎，作各樣的物件都要照着在山上指示你的樣式。所以撒旦從創世記起最大嘅陰謀就係要污染人類嘅 DNA 同埋基因。喺創世記曾經記載，撒旦利用墮落天使同人類嘅女子苟合去污染人類嘅血脈。創世記6章4節，那時候有偉人在地上，後來神的兒子們和人的女子們交合生子，那就是上古英武有名的人。因為當人類嘅基因被污染咗，或者被人為改動咗之後，呢個人就唔再係真正嘅人類，而神嘅靈亦唔會住喺呢種被污染嘅人類嘅身體之內。創世記6章1至3節，當人在世上多起來，有生女兒的時候，神的兒子們看見人的女子美貌，就隨意挑選，娶來為妻。耶和華說，人既屬乎血氣，我的靈就不永遠住在他裏面，然而他的日子還可到120年。所以如果任何人嘅基因被改動過，呢啲所謂嘅人類只會永遠滅亡，如同撒旦、墮落天使同邪靈一樣，唔能夠得着救恩。哥林多前書3章17節，若有人毀壞神的殿，神必要毀壞那人，因為神的殿是聖的，這殿就是你們。聖經中嘅但以理書亦曾預言有一日，敵基督會藉住污染神嘅聖殿，設立那行毀壞可憎嘅，使被污染嘅人永遠失去救恩。呢個就係當中嘅意思。但以理書11章31至33節，他必興兵，這兵必是屬聖地，就是保障，除掉常獻的燔祭，設立那行毀壞可憎的，作惡違背聖約的人，他必用巧言勾引。唯獨認識神的子民必剛強行事，民間的智慧人必分配多人，然而他們多日必倒在刀下，或被火燒，或被擄掠搶奪。而但以理書亦記載，將來敵基督嘅國度會由半泥半鐵嘅國民所摻雜而組成，而泥就係代表神所用泥土造成嘅人類，而鐵就係代表天使，所以敵基督嘅國度將由人同埋天使苟合所誕生嘅蛙弗音所領導嘅。而今日嘅基因工程已經能夠完成呢個工作。但以理書2章40至43節，第四國必堅壯如鐵，鐵能打碎克制百物，又能壓碎一切。那國也必打碎壓制列國。你既見杖的腳和腳趾頭，一半是窯匠的泥，一半是鐵，那國將來也必分開。你既見鐵與泥摻雜，那國也必有鐵的力量。那腳趾頭既是半鐵半泥，那國也必半強半弱。你既見鐵與泥摻雜，那國民也必與各種人摻雜，卻不能彼此相合，正如鐵與泥不能相合一樣。甚至喺新約嘅啟示錄就形容到將來敵基督掌權嘅時候，會使用666嘅晶片，亦即係獸印，使所有打咗獸印嘅人基因都會被改變，失去咗 成為神創造人類能夠讓神嘅靈居住嘅身份，並永遠沉淪，因為呢啲人都成為咗獸，而唔再係人類。啟示錄13章16至18節，他又叫眾人，無論大小、貧富、自主的、為奴的，都在右手上或是在額上受一個印記，除了那受印記有了獸名或有獸名數目的，都不得作買賣。在這裏有智慧，凡有聰明的，可以算計獸的數目，因為這是人的數目，他的數目是666。啟示錄19章20節，那獸被擒拿，那在獸面前曾行奇事、迷惑受獸印記和拜獸像之人的假先知，也與獸同被擒拿，他們兩個就活活的被扔在燒着硫磺的火湖裏。啟示錄14章9至11節，又有第三位天使接着他們，大聲說：若有人拜獸和獸像，在額上或在手上受了印記，這人也必喝神大怒的酒，此酒斟在神憤怒的杯中純一不雜。他要在聖天使和羔羊面前，在火與硫磺之中受痛苦。他受痛苦的煙往上冒，直到永永遠遠。那些拜獸和獸像、受他名之印記的，晝夜不得安寧。共濟會建立美國嘅目的，為要完成撒旦最後嘅計劃，亦係埃及嘅神話中提及有關俄塞里斯復活嘅預言，將會喺屬於處女座同埋伊西斯所代表嘅美國嘅土地當中嘅13個州，各自代表俄塞里斯身體嘅13個部分，加上華盛頓嘅方尖碑，就會誕生代表荷魯斯嘅全視之眼的基督。666獸印晶片亦從而誕生，使受咗獸印嘅人永遠失去承受救恩嘅機會。
因為我呢個身體係神嘅殿啊嘛，咁神嘅殿一定照住神嘅指定嘅樣式去做嘅，唔可以照住撒旦嘅樣式去做到好似隻野獸咁噶嘛，係咪？你睇 Freemason 佢哋所講嘅預言當中，一直都講佢要污染呢個殿啊，佢要將呢個殿污染，就好似舊約咁咧，喺呢個殿裏面獻豬一樣啊。當污染咗之後咧，神就會摒棄呢個殿噶嘛，而啟示都係咁講啊，神會摒棄好多到時會接受獸印嘅人噶嘛嚇，咁所以變咗原來咧，我哋所講嘅11嘅秘密呢個咧係可以話天大嘅陰謀。7嘅秘密咧就係講緊原來佢污染咗呢一個嘅DNA 之後咧，7嘅秘密就係講乜嘢啊？7個管道啊嘛，就可以去到陰間，去點樣啊？去讓陰間裏邊嘅邪靈去住喺呢個污染咗嘅身體度啊嘛。係咪？所以7同11嘅秘密根本係 Freemason 不斷去講。但係呢個陰謀裏邊其中一樣嘢，我想你知道咧，11個秘密一定要經過一樣嘢嘅，就係一定要使到你嘅身體敗壞到個階段咧，你接受佢哋所提供嘅方法去醫你嘅病，佢提供嘅 tips 俾你醫你自己嘅病。OK， 所以11個秘密其實其中一樣嘢，佢排第一定要導致我哋全世界人個個都係病壞，個個都喺細菌或者係病當中依靠晒西藥，而西藥一放棄嘅話，你就完全冇咗救主。咁 tips 就係你嘅救主啦，明唔明啊？咁所以變咗，你會睇到一樣好有趣嘅11個秘密，佢用2個毛衣人，亦即係2個麻衣人，就講出一個好大天大嘅秘密，就係咩啊？因為麻衣係世界上第一個，即係如果你話世界上有關於陰謀論當中最原始嘅陰謀係乜嘢咧？就係講麻啊嘛。
早喺1996年，日華牧師經已從研究聖經發現，當世界末後敵基督出現嘅時候，將會藉住種種陰謀去欺騙全世界，使人類墮落喺撒旦嘅手裏面。故此喺17年前，日華牧師經已按住神嘅帶領，揭示當今世上幕後操縱者嘅種種陰謀，包括司法陰謀和軍事陰謀、聯邦儲備局及經濟陰謀、教育陰謀、宗教陰謀、美國警察權力和槍械管制陰謀。毋庸置疑，日華牧師17年前極具前瞻性嘅教導，喺近2年終於陸續被世人發現，甚至人民終於出現大醒覺。2011年9月，佔領華爾街行動聲討美國聯邦儲備局及要求該局終止運作。2011年10月15日，一起佔領，全世界超過1400個城市支持，82個國家加入響應，反對政府經濟政策及聲討銀行家。2012年2月11日， 希臘10萬名示威者反對政府嘅經濟政策。除此之外，由1996年5月12日至7月28日，一連15篇信息揭露當今世上嘅醫藥陰謀。仲有由1996年8月11日至1997年4月27日，一連30篇信息，分享超過100年以嚟嘅科技陰謀。原來我哋現代嘅生活從根本已全被蒙在鼓裏。按住牧師所分享嘅科技陰謀與醫藥陰謀嘅信息嘅內容，相比下，現今生活嘅科技水平最少倒退咗超過50年。喺治療癌症嘅藥物方面，倒退咗數百年；電力及免費能源方面，亦都倒退咗100年。縱使現今電力科技看似昌明，但係亦都唔及1890年代尼古拉·特斯拉所發明嘅免費能源嘅時代。特斯拉發明咗特斯拉線圈同埋高頻嘅無線電力傳輸，藉住無線電力傳輸技術，能夠將免費電力傳送俾每一個人使用。因為特斯拉線圈能夠將原本600瓦功率嘅電力，即無線電力傳輸技術，讓所有人每人都可以接收到600瓦嘅免費能源。對比今時今日嘅電力供應，特斯拉線圈嘅電力供應實在係匪夷所思，令人讚嘆。又例如喺2012年7月15日2012榮耀盼望第127篇惡意淘汰嘅分享裏面，又和牧師揭示到，早於1930年代全球經濟大蕭條末期，嗰個時代嘅科技已經可以製造出磨唔爛嘅衣服、唔損耗嘅車胎及用之不竭嘅免費能源等等發明。只係一群幕後操縱者喺歷史上面刻意將呢啲嘅知識同埋科技隱瞞，因為呢一群幕後操縱者嘅目的，要全世界嘅人皆需要依賴呢一群精英，即共濟會所提供嘅經濟、醫藥、科技、工業同埋免費能源嚟繼續生活。事實上，人類喺共濟會嘅操控下，喺所有嘅範疇上皆不斷浪費同埋消耗，但卻永遠得唔到需要上真正嘅滿足。甚至全球嘅經濟、政治同埋權力均落入共濟會 Freemason 嘅150家族之中，使幕後嘅操控者能夠賺盡全世界嘅財富，並實行共濟會所計劃嘅新世界秩序。進而撒旦幕後所操縱嘅共濟會，利用種種嘅陰謀，要讓地上所有嘅人至終失去永生嘅資格。故此，基督徒必須擁有真正屬神嘅智慧，成為世界末後真正嘅智者。但以理書11章33節，民間的智慧人必訓誨多人。但以理書12章3節，智慧人必發光，如同天上的光，那使多人歸義的必發光如星，直到永永遠遠。
譬如好似我哋麻，我哋知道好普通嘅，即係殺人如麻，係咪？點解啊？心亂如麻，點解用麻？因為麻係一種好普通、多到咧好緊要嘅嘢嚟噶嘛。麻就係乜嘢？我哋講緊做細麻布啊，我哋麻包袋啊、麻繩啊。你知唔知以前咧麻係本身係我哋喺叫做未有文明嘅時候咧，做船業啊成啊好需要呢啲麻噶，所以變咗佢係成為一個經濟好主要嘅命脈嚟嘅，係即係全世界經濟好主要嘅命脈嚟嘅。
喺中國，麻已經有6000幾年嘅種植歷史，係一種重要嘅經濟作物。傳統入邊嘅六穀當中就包括咗麻，但喺現今人們嘅印象當中，麻即係大麻，總係同毒品同埋罪惡聯繫埋一齊。喺20世紀初，種植、擁有、使用同埋買賣大麻同埋佢嘅製品，喺全球好多地方已經屬於非法活動。其後有啲國家對佢繼續加強監管。根據香港危險藥物條例，大麻同埋大麻樹枝都屬於危險藥物種類，所以大麻同埋海洛因、鴉片一樣，都係列為毒品嘅一種。但係另一方面，而家喺一啲國家，包括比利時、加拿大、捷克共和國、荷蘭、以色列同埋美國23個州，已經可以合法使用大麻作為藥用用途。 喺加拿大、西班牙、中國、日本、韓國、英國、法國、南非、埃及同埋愛爾蘭，大麻都被允許作為一種合法嘅經濟作物。或者大家有所不知，究竟麻嘅實際用途有幾廣呢？原來若果以一種物料或者係單一嘅農作植物計算，麻可算係世界上最多用途嘅原材料。麻嘅用途包括麻樹嘅莖、葉、花、種子等等，都可以被當為經濟作物同埋工業原料。佢嘅植物纖維同埋種子油脂可以用嚟製紙、紡織布料、麻繩、生物降解塑膠材料、建築材料、健康食品、化妝品、煮食油、動物飼料、燃料、油墨，並喺工業上存有好多非常有價值嘅用途。此外，麻樹係一種能夠快速生長嘅生物質能，每年每公頃嘅農地能夠生產出25噸嘅乾燥麻嘅材料。由於種植麻樹唔需要使用太多殺蟲劑同埋殺草劑，佢都係一種環保嘅經濟作物。由於麻嘅植物纖維，人們都中意將佢當成紡織原料。佢嘅來源豐富，包括麻、苎麻、亞麻、黃麻、羅布麻等等。其中亞麻係世界上最古老嘅紡織纖維，主要產於蘇聯、波蘭、德國、比利時、法國同埋愛爾蘭等國。而北愛爾蘭同埋比利時係世界上最大嘅出口國。黑龍江同埋吉林亦係中國主要嘅產地。至於苎麻，起源於中國，所以又被稱為中國草。目前中國、菲律賓、巴西為主要產地。中國嘅苎麻強度高，纖維素含量高，光澤好，廣受國際市場歡迎。麻係一年生草本，高1至3米，佢嘅莖直立，分支同埋皮層都富含纖維，基部木質化，掌狀複葉互生，經下部嘅葉對生，葉片邊緣有粗鋸齒，上邊呈深綠色且粗糙，有粗毛，下邊密披灰白色尖毛。佢嘅花果生長期因產地不同而異，華東花期為5至6月，果期6至7月，華北嘅花期則係6至7月，果期8至9月。雖然麻具有咁廣泛嘅用途，但係背後原來存住極大嘅陰謀。
Do you know that there's a plant strong enough to replace plastic, oil, and building materials? That the same plant has been cultivated for industrial purposes for over 12,000 years. Yet it's been classified as a Schedule I controlled substance drug by the U.S. government. Recently, Kentucky Agriculture Commissioner James Cormer has requested a legal review of the steps necessary for hemp regulation. The federal ban is lifted on growing the crop. That's right. Kentucky could soon be reviving an industry that only a century ago was considered to be the most important cash crop and vital to the strength of the U.S. economy. So let's backtrack a little bit and talk about what hemp actually is. Throughout human existence, hemp has been used as an important source of fuel, clothing, shelter, and even food for people all over the world. In this country, industrial hemp was widely cultivated since America's first settlers arrived in the early 1600s. In fact, even our founding fathers acknowledged hemp's enormous benefits. George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson all grew hemp on their private farms. And Jefferson was even quoted once as saying hemp is one of the greatest important substances of our nation. The Declaration of Independence itself was even drafted on paper derived from hemp. So what happened? How did one of the most versatile and adaptable species of crops in the world also become one of the most politically polarizing agricultural resources? Well, in the early 20th century, the plant became labeled a threat so dangerous that it should be wiped out. But it wasn't dangerous to anyone or anything except the industries that it could phase out of existence. So what did the establishment do to ensure their allegiance to the very industries they serve? Well, they did what they do best. They lied and smeared hemp through a propaganda campaign that associated the plant with marijuana. And in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act redefined hemp as a narcotic, which required farmers to obtain a special tax stamp to grow the crop. By 1970, the Controlled Substances Act made growing the crop without a DEA-issued permit strictly illegal. Because of the government crackdown on the crop, it has a negative association. Yet the plant remains illegal under U.S. federal law. And like I said before, not because it's a danger to people, but because it's a danger to corporations.
實在喺現今嘅世界入邊，因住幕後操縱者喺醫藥、能源、工業同埋經濟方面嘅陰謀，而對麻嘅用途作出咗極唔公平嘅壓抑。詳情喺2012榮耀盼望第197篇將有詳細講解。
但係當我哋講嘅工業革命一開始嘅時候呢，就發現一樣嘢啦。佢發現咗乜嘢呢？邊個想知啊？發現咗就係，如果原來呢個世界，聽住咯，原來呢個世界呢係冇晒任何醫藥嘅話，如果呢個世界完全冇晒任何嘅金屬嘅話，如果呢個世界冇晒我哋所講任何能源嘅話，如果淨係選擇有一樣嘢嘅話，去取替晒呢啲，而並且仲要比佢哋更加平、更加好嘅，係乜嘢呢？就係麻啦。你知唔知道？可能大家唔知道呢，你而家日日坐住架名貴車，用住一個好重型嘅 engine， 孭住一個鐵殼，日本嗰啲就鐵皮殼，呢個係個好大嘅陰謀嚟嘅，係最低能嘅人先至用呢一種嘅方法去做一架車出嚟噶嘛。你知唔知道喺半個世紀前，用麻做出嚟嘅車殼係用鐵錘都打唔甩噶，佢係輕過我哋所講嘅碳纖維嘅。
亨利·福特，共濟會成員，係美國汽車工程師同埋企業家福特汽車公司嘅建立者。佢亦係世界上第一位成功咁樣將裝配線概念實際應用而取得巨大嘅成就，因此曾經成為世界上其中一位最富有嘅人，而且以呢種方式令到汽車喺美國真正普及化。呢種新嘅生產方式使汽車成為一種大眾產品。佢唔單止改革咗工業生產方式，而且對現代社會同埋文化起咗巨大嘅影響。因此，有一啲社會理論學家將呢一段經濟同埋社會歷史稱為福特主義。亨利·福特係一位具有發明家精神嘅工業家。佢從細個開始就對機械感興趣。12歲嘅時候，佢花咗好多時間建立咗一個自己嘅機械坊。15歲嘅時候，佢親手做咗一台內燃機。1891年，福特成為愛迪生照明公司嘅一個工程師。當佢喺1893年晉升為主工程師後，佢有足夠嘅時間同埋金錢嚟進行佢個人對內燃機嘅研究。1896年，佢製造咗佢嘅第一架汽車，佢將佢命名為4輪車。1908年，福特公司推出咗福特 T 型車。從1909年至1913年，福特嘅 T 型車喺好多次比賽裏面獲勝。同年，福特將流水線引入佢嘅工廠，從而大幅提高咗生產量，並首次引申出後來喺工業上發揚光大嘅量產概念。1918年，喺美國行駛嘅半數汽車係 T 型車，呢個設計一直被保持到1927年。到1927年，福特公司一共生產咗1500萬部 T 型車。直到45年之後，呢個世界紀錄先至被打破。上世紀嘅20年代，普遍汽車都係用電油同埋柴油行駛，但當時亨利·福特已經認為植物所提煉嘅乙醇先至係真正未來嘅燃料。一畝番薯田一年所能出量嘅乙醇，足夠一輛汽車使用1年。呢個係出自亨利·福特口中嘅名言。亨利·福特一直對於用植物纖維做嘅塑膠物料嚟做汽車嘅零件好有興趣。喺1942年1月13日，福特完成咗一部幾乎全部由植物纖維做嘅塑膠物料組成嘅車嘅專利，並且生產咗一部實驗汽車。而大麻纖維係呢一部汽車其中一個主要嘅成分，而呢一部汽車所用嘅亦係以植物油作為燃料，而大麻油亦係當中一種重要嘅成分。佢比一般嘅車要輕30%，可以承受一般鋼鐵做嘅車多10倍嘅衝擊力。甚至有報道指出，實際上第一架福特 T 型車嘅原型係用大麻纖維造成嘅，亦係以大麻油作為燃料。而大麻油作為燃料，亦比石油所提煉嘅電油同埋柴油更加安全同埋更加清潔，對汽車引擎亦都更好。 可惜呢架車從未正式被大量生產出嚟。
Henry Ford's first Model T was built to run on hemp gasoline, and the car itself was constructed from hemp. On his large estate, Ford was photographed among his hemp fields. The car, grown from the soil, had hemp plastic panels whose impact strength was 10 times stronger than steel. Henry Ford ran 40,000 vehicles on hemp fuel from only 10,000 acres. The emissions are what you exhale, and the next year's crop reconverts it back into oxygen. That's a natural cycle fuel. We think that our ethanol and biofuels and flex fuel systems are all the cutting edge, but biofuel development, of course, is nothing new. Way back in the 1930s, Henry Ford was hard at work in the alternative fuel sector, and in 1941, he constructed a hemp-fueled and hemp-bodied prototype car. The plastic body panels were composed of 70% cellulose fibers, including industrial strength, mixed with a resin binder, and apparently they were pretty sturdy. A guy beats on the trunk with an axe and it fails to leave a mark. Industrial hemp won't make you high. It has no THC in it, but its association with marijuana has historically been a major legal stumbling block. But the actual footage of 1941 should be proof enough for you.
Amongst the thousands of products made from hemp, one of the most extraordinary is Henry Ford's plastic car. Built in 1941, it contained cellulose fibers derived from hemp, sisal, and wheat straw. The plastic was lighter than steel, yet could withstand 10 times the impact without denting.
可惜大麻纖維用以用嚟造車嘅用途，因為一個陰謀而被人遺忘咗幾十年。到咗2010年同埋2013年，一間加拿大汽車公司 Castrol EV 發表咗2部用大麻纖維所造成嘅電動汽車。
Well, something old is new again. A new electric car made of hemp is being developed by a group of Canadian companies working in conjunction with the Canadian government. The Kestrel will be prototyped and tested this fall by Calgary-based Motive Industries Incorporated, a high-tech auto manufacturer. Now, this compact car, which seats 4, will have a top speed of 90 kilometers or about 56 miles an hour and a range of up to 100 miles before needing to be recharged. The car's body will be made of an impact-resistant composite material produced from mats of, you guessed it, hemp. The hemp is also being grown in Canada. Now, Henry Ford was the first to build a car made of hemp fiber and resin back in the 1930s. That was more than half a century ago, but the idea wasn't developed much further as cannabis prohibition went into effect in 1937 and car manufacturers favored other materials such as steel. But in the last 25 years, fiberglass and carbon fiber-based composites have gained popularity as materials for automobiles because they are strong and lighter weight. But producing composites from glass or carbon requires intense heat and multiple chemical processes, making them very energy intensive. In contrast, plant-based fibers like hemp is grown in a field using only the energy of the sun. As a structural material, hemp is about twice the strength of other plant fibers. It doesn't require much water or pesticide, and it also produces a high yield and grows well in Canada. Nathan Armstrong, president of Motive Industries Incorporated, adds, and I quote, "It's illegal to grow cannabis in the U.S., so it actually gives Canada a bit of a market advantage," end quote. The U.S. does, however, allow the import of processed hemp. We here at Cannabis Planet applaud the effort of the Canadian government and their private industry partners. But we can't help but question the wisdom of our own government for continuing to prohibit cannabis, particularly in these trying financial times. This amazing plant can be used as a food, fuel, fiber, and medicine. It creates new jobs, promotes industry, and generates new tax revenues. It's time for the politicians in Washington to wake up and smell the, well, you know where I'm going with this. For Cannabis Planet, I'm Pat Finnerty. Now make it a great evening.
你知唔知而家由有車開始到而家，任何一個俾喺汽車當中車禍當中撞死嘅每一個人，佢應該追翻條命，去追翻呢一班擺陰謀落去嘅人。你知唔知麻呢？當工業革命開始咗之後呢，佢發現用麻去做嘅嘢咧係硬過金屬，輕過碳纖維。佢哋發覺用麻提煉出嚟嘅電油呢係平過我哋所講嘅原油嘅。
生物燃料泛指由生物質組成或者萃取嘅固體、液體或氣體燃料，可以代替由石油製取嘅汽油同柴油，係可再生能源開發利用嘅重要方向。所謂嘅生物質係指利用大氣、水、土地等通過光合作用而產生嘅各種有機體，即係一切有生命嘅、可以生長嘅有機物質。佢包括植物、動物同埋微生物，唔同於石油、煤炭、核能等傳統嘅燃料。呢種新興嘅燃料係可再生燃料。一般嚟講，生物燃料都係大豆或者係粟米為原料嚟製造嘅。可惜嘅係，粟米雖然係最主要嘅生物燃料來源，但係粟米作為能源卻係極低成本效益。例如現今美國已經使用超過40%嘅粟米出產作為生產生物能源，但卻只有10% 左右嘅汽車係使用生物能源。全球卻有10億人係喺飢餓之中。就算美國用全國大小嘅土地種植粟米，所出產嘅能源都唔足夠現時嘅美國使用。而根據2005年嘅研究指出，生產粟米所需要嘅能源比佢所出產嘅燃料所含嘅能源仲多29%。但其實工業大麻先係最好嘅生物燃料來源，因為工業大麻係全地球上最高生長效能嘅生物，只需4個月就能生產出每英畝10公噸嘅工業大麻。而根據一啲統計指出，人類只需要使用大約6% 美國嘅國土大細嘅土地，即係比德克薩斯州仲要細嘅面積，就能夠生產出足夠全人類用作所有能源嘅工業大麻生物燃料，代替所有由石油生產嘅能源。所以人類現今所面對嘅各種問題，包括饑荒、土地荒漠化、森林減少、空氣污染、能源短缺同健康問題，都係由一小撮貪心嘅銀行家同石油工業家所造成嘅。
And we certainly are glad that the hemp car is here at the Knox County Fair. We invite you, it's only going to be here today, so I would suggest you get here to the Knox County Fair and look over the hemp car, find out all about this alternative to our fuel of motoring around the United States. Now, you're involved in the fuel end of this, is that right?
Correct. Apple Energy is dedicated to the construction of micro biodiesel facilities. 500,000 gallons production a year in regional communities, as opposed to macro construction, which would be multi-million gallon a year facilities where you have to truck your grain a 5 hours drive. We believe in wherever the grain is grown, the fuel should be manufactured there.
And we need alternative fuels, and we need to find ways to be able to fuel our vehicles without something other than oil products.
Correct. And the beauty of biodiesel is you can use any oilseed crop, ranging from castor bean to palm oil to soy oil to hemp oil, and create a fuel that is 90% cleaner, 90% less carcinogenic than standard diesel fuel. Same energy, but 90% cleaner.
What kind of mileage are they getting on the hemp car?
Pre-introduction of biodiesel, they were getting 27 miles per gallon. Post-introduction of biodiesel, 27 miles per gallon.
Okay, so pretty much there.
Across the board.
Are they traveling all over the United States with the hemp car?
Correct. It's a 10,000-mile journey on the map, starting from Virginia, D.C., to Montreal, Canada, to Toronto, Detroit, down to Columbus, back up to Winnipeg, Canada, over to Vancouver, down to Seattle, down to San Diego, over to Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, and back up to DC.
Could hemp fuel help us to kick our dependency on highly toxic fossil fuels? Carbon monoxide is the leading cause of death in this country from burning. It accounts for more fatalities each year than drug overdoses combined.
Over history, it would be hard to predict how many people have died from gasoline that didn't know what killed them. It is poison-spreading material because it is distilled with benzene, hexene, and xylene, and toluene. These chemicals are all known carcinogenic materials.
Normal drinking alcohol, also known as ethanol, is the cleanest of all liquid fuels. George Tyson is developing techniques to produce ethanol from fast-growing, high-cellulose plants like hemp.
We jokingly say this is the fuel that if you were burning it in your car, the reason a dog would chase your car was because he liked the smell of the exhaust pipe. As you can see, there is no smoke emitting from this in this room. Try this with a tablespoon or two of gasoline, and you will have the comparative test. Also, when your engine is through burning on gasoline, take it apart and see how much dirty carbon you find in the engine. We found that running a car 3,500 miles, we couldn't even get a white glove dirty when we took our finger inside of the exhaust pipe.
All plants are storehouses of solar energy, and all plants can be fermented to produce ethanol fuel. Plants also produce the oxygen needed to combust the fuel in a car. The emissions, carbon dioxide and water, are reabsorbed by plants. It is a clean and balanced cycle.
When one reviews all of the possible alternative fuels that we may use for transport use, ethanol emerges as about the only one that can achieve significant reductions in carbon dioxide accumulation in the atmosphere.
All plants are made from lignin and cellulose. Fast-growing plants that are low in lignin and high in cellulose are most suitable for producing ethanol. Cellulosic ethanol, made from lignocellulose, any plant matter, is very different from making ethanol from corn. Unfortunately, most ethanol on the market today is corn-based ethanol, and recently the corn ethanol industry has been heavily criticised for pushing up grain prices, contributing to world hunger. The corn ethanol industry is not a viable alternative fuel. In the case of a hemp crop, a farmer could harvest high-value hemp seeds and fibre, and possibly medicine, and still have 75% of the biomass of his crop to sell to his local ethanol plant. The US government recently put hundreds of millions of dollars towards funding 6 cellulosic ethanol plants, and 10 major US universities are vigorously researching ethanol production. They have now theoretically discovered the technology to produce cellulosic ethanol at a price competitive with crude oil prices. That's great news, but like every industry, the cellulosic ethanol industry will have certain limits to be sustainable. Critics have noted that the technology could also be used to further decimate our forests and to further deplete our soils. So it's unlikely that ethanol will provide all of our liquid fuel needs. However, in my vision, especially with hemp as a major contributor, I can see that ethanol could be a valuable part of a sustainable energy future.
你知唔知道當麻曾幾何時喺半個世紀前呢，佢係普及去代替電油嘅時候呢，當時洛克菲勒呢一紮人呢係將佢哋嘅石油倒落海噶嘛，直至到佢哋立法導致到麻係被禁止。被禁止係點啊？有人濫用，但係你知唔知道啊？你嘗試去睇下真正嘅科學研究呢，如果以濫用煙、濫用酒、煙啫噃，我講緊酒同埋麻嚟講呢，即係大麻食大麻。如果呢三樣去濫用嘅話，最高嘅危險呢係煙同酒，而唔係大麻㗎。
喺世界上絕大部分嘅國家，各類酒同埋煙草皆合法售賣俾成年人。所以雖然大部分毒品，例如海洛因同埋可卡因，毒性同埋上癮程度都比酒同埋煙草大， 但可能好多人都唔知道，酒同埋煙草嘅禍害遠大於海洛因，因為酒同埋煙草普遍比較容易得到，所以受影響嘅人數比毒品要多數千倍，而飲酒同埋吸煙嘅次數都平均比毒品更多。酒同埋毒品一樣，具真正作用，同樣會令人上癮，亦都會造成身體病變同埋意外。唔少入院嘅病人都係同飲酒有關。酒精會帶嚟嘅行為問題包括打鬥、爭論、錢銀瓜葛、家庭不和同埋即興嘅性行為等。酒精會令你做咗平日都唔會做嘅事。飲酒可引致各種家居、交通、工作、運動方面嘅意外或者遇溺等等。醉酒會引致嚴重宿醉、腸胃炎、吐血、失去知覺甚至死亡。長期酗酒損害肝臟，增加患上癌病嘅機會。酒精會帶嚟嘅精神問題，唔少人相信飲酒可以使人心情舒暢，但事實上飲酒會使人情緒低落。唔少自殺成功嘅人都有酗酒嘅毛病。酒精會影響你嘅記憶，喺極端嘅情況下會損害你嘅腦部。有啲酗酒者更會出現幻覺，聽見一啲唔存在嘅聲音，呢個係極不愉快嘅體驗。有時幻聽更會持續同埋難以消除。有唔少人會借酒消愁，希望用酒除去不快嘅情緒，但飲酒過量原來係嚴重抑鬱症嘅病徵之一。更加常見嘅係抑鬱症原來係由飲酒過量引致。煙草嘅主要有害成分包括尼古丁、焦油同埋一氧化碳。吸煙行為其實同時損害吸煙者同埋附近被動咁樣吸二手煙者嘅健康。因此歐盟同埋美國都允許僱主拒絕聘用同埋開除吸煙者，而好多國家都規定室內公共場所唔可以吸煙。一啲地方甚至將禁令延伸至私人住宅。吸煙者同埋被動吸煙者都會吸入數千種有害嘅化學物質。吸煙除咗引致口氣、牙跡、咳嗽、痰多或者喉部不適，更加會引致各種病症。而根據《刺針醫學雜誌》指出，煙草比酒嘅藥癮性同埋依賴性更大。另外，煙草中嘅尼古丁係一種神經毒素，主要侵害人嘅神經系統。一啲吸煙者喺主觀上感覺吸煙可以解除疲勞、振作精神等等，呢啲係神經系統嘅過度興奮，實際上係尼古丁引起嘅欣快感。興奮後嘅神經系統隨即出現抑制，所以吸煙後神經肌肉反應嘅靈敏度同埋精確度都會下降。一項研究結果表明，吸煙者嘅智力效能比唔吸煙嘅減低 10.6%。 世界衛生組織估計，同吸煙相關嘅疾病每年導致大約500萬人過早死亡，其中大約有60萬非吸煙者死於二手煙嘅危害。吸煙會引致癌症，煙草入邊主要引致癌症嘅物質嚟自焦油，而吸煙亦係引致多種致命癌症嘅原因，而大部分肺癌都係由吸煙引起嘅。吸煙者患肺癌嘅機會率比非吸煙者高900%，煙癮大嘅吸煙者患肺癌嘅機會率更高達1400%。吸煙會引致嘅心血管疾病包括冠狀動脈心臟病、動脈瘤、末梢血管病、中風等等。吸煙會令支氣管內積聚有毒物質，阻礙人體吸入嘅空氣正常呼出，更加會引起肺部氣囊破裂，導致呼吸困難。嚴重者更加會出現肺氣腫同埋慢性支氣管炎，需要利用氧氣罩協助呼吸。吸煙會引致生殖系統疾病，女性吸煙者嘅自然流產機會較非吸煙者高出10倍。嚟自吸煙孕婦嘅新生嬰兒死亡率比嚟自非吸煙孕婦高出1/3。
咁點解佢會禁止大麻？因為佢立法嘅時候咧用咗第二個學名，所以啲議員係唔知道佢哋禁緊麻，所以佢哋先批准啫嘛。到而家嚟講，煙同酒嘅危害我知有法例立咗去，不過唔係犯法㗎，你食煙或者飲酒。但係點解大麻係呢？
刺針為世界上歷史最悠久及最受重視嘅同行評審性質醫學期刊，主要由愛斯維爾出版公司發行，部分係由里德愛斯維爾集團協同出版。期刊於1823年由湯姆·魏克萊創刊，佢以外科用具柳葉刀為刊物命名，而 Lancet 喺英語中有尖頂穹蒼嘅意思，寓意住期刊立志成為照亮醫學界嘅名槍。刺針喺一啲重大嘅醫學議題上以直言敢說而聞名。近年嘅例子包括批評世界衛生組織拒絕讓順勢療法正式成為眾多治療法嘅選擇之一，發表2003年美伊戰爭平民傷亡嘅統計，以及唔贊成里德愛斯維爾集團與軍需產業有所關聯等等。刺針目前已衍生出幾份附屬性嘅專業期刊，呢啲期刊嘅刊名均以刺針作起頭，如刺針神經學、刺針腫瘤學、刺針傳染病、刺針呼吸道醫學、刺針糖尿病與內分泌學及刺針全球衛生等。喺2007年3月24日出版嘅第369期刺針期刊中，刊登咗一份醫學報告，題目名為 Development of a Rational Scale to Assess the Harm of Drugs of Potential Misuse， 以合理比例評估潛在誤用藥物危害嘅發展。醫學報告由英國布里斯托爾大學、英國醫學科學院精神藥理學部教授 David Budd、英國倫敦法醫科學服務教授 Leslie A. King、倫敦警察基金會 William Salisbury、倫敦醫療研究理事會、牛頓大學生理學、解剖學同遺傳學學系教授 Colin Blakemore 共同研究。文中對誤用同濫用20種藥物對人體造成精神同身體上嘅傷害作出研究，例如可卡因、海洛因、安非他命、合成代謝類固醇、氯胺酮、酒精、煙草同大麻。而誤用同濫用以上20種藥物對人體造成精神同身體上傷害嘅排名為：第一，海洛因；第二，可卡因；酒精排第5，比第6位俗稱 K 仔嘅氯胺酮仲高；煙草則排第9。而誤用同濫用大麻對人體精神同身體上嘅傷害排第11，竟然比喺世界各地，包括香港都合法銷售嘅酒精同煙草都要低。而精神上嘅傷害最主要係指誤用同濫用呢20種藥物，令使用者依賴藥物，產生成癮性。基本上，大麻並唔會令使用者於生理上對大麻產生依賴。另外，根據1994年美國國家藥物濫用研究所同加州大學博士 Dr. Jack E. Henningfield 研究6種物質嘅報告，佢哋對尼古丁、海洛因、可卡因、酒精、咖啡因同大麻會令使用者產生5種問題，包括上癮度、戒斷症狀、加強使用度、中毒度同增加使用度作出排名。大麻喺以上5種問題中，其中3項排名最低，甚至比咖啡因仲要低，分別係戒斷症狀、增加使用度同上癮度。喺6種物質嘅排名中，大麻嘅平均排名亦都係最低嘅。可是現今各國政府卻完全冇規管咖啡因類產品嘅使用同銷售，當中包括咖啡、茶、可樂類汽水同提神類飲品等等。而酒精喺戒斷症狀同中毒度呢2項問題中排首位之外，喺6種物質中亦排首位，比可卡因同海洛因仲要高。
但係問題，如果呢個世界有一樣嘢係可以如我所講嘅醫病嘅話，咪就係用麻榨出嚟嘅油咯。你睇下自然療法呢啲嘅資料，你會知道。我只係俾個報告你啫喎。
雖然按住香港法例，大麻屬危險藥品，但係事實上，相對被禁用幾十年嘅時間，原來人類已經合法同大量使用大麻幾千年。只不過喺1930年代， 因住財閥為咗私利嘅陰謀而被禁制，甚至現時任何人出嚟提倡合法使用大麻，亦都會被視為好似嬉皮士一樣嘅反社會墮落人物。但係隨住資訊流通，人民亦開始醒覺，大麻喺過去其實係有住非凡嘅藥用同埋其他價值。麻呢一個字係指屋裏面所曬涼嘅植物意思。喺中醫應用方面，李時珍嘅《本草綱目》已經記述大麻各個部分嘅應用，包括麻鉢、麻粉、麻仁、油、葉、黃麻同埋麻根嘅用法。喺古代，大麻主治功用總合如下：而喺西醫方面，喺1860年代開始，大麻作為藥物嘅各種療效，已收藏喺官方嘅美國藥典，作為俾所有醫生處方嘅參考，所以喺當時係官方承認嘅藥物之一。當時醫生處方大麻為藥物，並冇發現好似現時所提及，認為大麻會使人上癮嘅情況。事實上，大麻含有60種精神化學成分，統稱為 cannabinoids， 其中最主要係 tetrahydrocannabinol， 即4氫大麻酚 THC。雖然使人喺腦部產生迷幻、鬆弛嘅感覺，但同時間，若果抽取當中嘅有效成分，就能夠帶嚟各種療效，舒緩各種痛症之餘，亦唔會使人有迷幻嘅感覺，成為唔能夠替代嘅有效藥物。
I have MS, multiple sclerosis. Using the cannabis treatment after trying 3 different medicines for my suffering, and this is the only thing that is really affecting.
Behind this wall and past this guard is a discreet Tel Avivian store, which caters to about 2,000 customers a month who come here to purchase marijuana. We're talking about drugs used as medication for sick patients who manage to obtain a license from several hospitals around the country.
If we take the situation today and we compare it to the situation 4 or 5 years ago, then we've grown 10 times. Medical cannabis is a term that relates to a certain type of cannabis which is used for solely medical purposes. Those medical purposes usually include pain relief, that is. Medical cannabis is first of all being used in order to help people manage their pain.
甚至就算係喺治療癌症進行化療期間所造成嘅痛楚，亦都能夠消除，並且冇任何副作用。呢個係石油化工藥物都唔能夠做到嘅。所以喺美國合法使用大麻嘅州份，醫生會處方大麻作為鎮痛之用。
So I'm a cancer doctor, and every day I see patients with cancer who have nausea from their chemotherapy or their cancer, loss of appetite, pain, depression, insomnia. And my experience over the past 30 years of being an oncologist is that there's one medicine that I could recommend to patients that can take care of all of those problems. Instead of writing 5 different prescription drugs, all of which have side effects and addictive potential, I can tell my cancer patients to try marijuana to take care of any combination of those symptoms.
It's truly amazing the number of conditions that respond favorably to cannabis. The number one condition is pain. Cannabis is useful in relieving people's pain. It's particularly effective in relieving pain from connective tissue disorders, from arthritis, from fibromyalgia, from systemic lupus, from reflex sympathetic dystrophy, a whole host of conditions that we don't really understand very well. People seem to get good relief from cannabis. People are able to decrease the amount of opiates that they're taking, and in some instances to stop taking opiates entirely for pain control. The founder of modern medicine is a physician named Sir William Osler, who was prominent around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. He wrote the first textbook of internal medicine, and in that textbook, he said that cannabis was the most effective medication for the treatment of migraine headaches. And I certainly have a number of people with migraines who get substantial relief or even prevention of their migraines by consumption of cannabis. Other conditions that commonly respond favorably to marijuana include depression. It helps people with sleep. It helps their appetite. It's also very good in treating GI symptoms, nausea, diarrhea. It's excellent for treating Crohn's disease. We did a little study of people with Crohn's disease and found that many of them were able to stop using steroids and stop using other medications that they had taken for their Crohn's, that they had less diarrhea, they had less abdominal pain. It was a true miracle for them.
隨住各項嘅研究，大麻超越傳統西醫嘅功效，亦慢慢被發現喺醫生嘅監管下作出安全而有效嘅使用。
Dozens of major studies have been published in the last few years that indicate that the chemicals in cannabis, in the lab and in animals, have a significant effect on fighting almost all major cancers, including brain, breast, prostate, lung, thyroid, colon, skin, pituitary, melanoma, and leukemia cancers. They do this by promoting the death of cancer cells that have forgotten how to die, as well as a reduction in their crucial blood supply, while leaving healthy cells untouched. The THC and its sisters seek out and bind with the endocannabinoid receptors already inside us. Together, they give the body more ammunition against all of the diseases of modern times.
And let me show you what we have. So this is an image from our subject from today.
The receptors are highlighted in what color?
In bright red. Well, any color that you see, there are receptors. And red is the really dense areas. And you can see there's a lot of red and yellow. Green and blue are the really not dense areas where there are not many receptors in our brain.
So they really are everywhere?
Yes, yes. Yeah. In fact, they're the densest receptors, one of the densest receptors in the brain, most populated throughout the entire brain. Right into the brain. Look how hot that is.
Wow.
Right in the brain. But there's also cannabinoid receptors in the liver. Also, look at the bone marrow, the vertebral column, the ribs.
So how do you think what we're seeing here in this image, how does that relate to the experience of using cannabis?
Well, look at the amount of cannabinoid receptors in the brain. A lot of them. A lot of the effects of cannabis use are in the brain. Euphoria, as an anxiolytic, it dissolves your anxiety, or it can even cause your anxiety. So cannabis abusers or cannabis users talk about having this high, the euphoria. That's probably from some of the deep structures of the brain.
Scientists are now experimenting to see which parts of the pot plant, including its cannabinoids and other biological compounds, might be the most effective against a variety of diseases, including diabetes and cancer. Despite all the difficulties, there's a group of doctors in the U.S. and abroad who have been advancing the research on the medical use of cannabis with highly impressive and sometimes revolutionary discoveries.
In a scholarly cancer review article published in 2009, there were over 421 chemical compounds identified in the cannabis plant. And within this group of natural substances, there are many chemicals that have significant anti-tumor properties at low enough doses to where they would be effective cancer treatments. That's an important part of this. It's one thing to be able to kill a cancer cell, but could you really survive such a treatment?
A botanist from the University of Colorado Springs branch, Robert Melamede, who has written an article sort of comparing the carcinogenic effect of cannabis with tobacco and explaining why he thinks that cannabis has the anti-cancer effect for lung cancer.
There's nothing else that impacts on so many of our illnesses. You see, when I talk about these age-related illnesses, we're all aging, but we don't all come down with cardiovascular disease. We don't all come down with autoimmune disease. We don't all come down with cognitive dysfunction. We don't all come down with cancer. But the chances are we're going to come down with one of them. All right? And here we have this one drug that's able to help us holistically with our biochemistry to restore balance. You know, cannabinoids kill cancer cells in many cases. People are not aware of that. They think cancer, cannabis, anti-nausea. It's way beyond that.
There are also studies taking a look at other organ systems that have found that marijuana seeks out the cancerous cells and preferentially kills them over the healthy cells.
There's a wealth of laboratory evidence that these anti-tumor properties kill cancer cells in a variety of ways. There are multiple mechanisms of action identified by which cannabis kills cancer cells, and they're divided into various categories. And among these are anti-proliferative effects. Normally, that's one of the hallmarks of a cancer cell, is that it just keeps reproducing. So if you stop the reproduction, that's an anti-proliferative effect. There are anti-angiogenesis effects, and this means that the cannabinoids will stop the tumor from being able to elaborate or grow new blood vessels to support the growth of the tumor. There are anti-metastatic effects, and that is simple enough to mean that the cannabinoids block the ability of the cancer cells to spread into other tissues. And there's another effect that has a wild name, apoptotic effect. Apoptosis refers to the ability of cannabinoids to speed the death of the abnormal cells.
而以上所提出大麻能夠殺死癌細胞嘅機制，包括停止癌細胞不斷繁殖、抑制癌瘤血管新生作用、阻止癌細胞擴散到其他組織、加快異常細胞死亡。以西醫嘅角度，要達至每一種機制，亦都需要處方唔同嘅抗癌藥，並且到現時為止，亦都係喺試驗嘅階段，並唔能夠保證100%有效，而且每一種都有佢嘅副作用。相反，面對最難處理嘅腦癌，大麻具有獨特嘅功效。
The ability of cannabinoids to kill bad cells while protecting healthy ones is particularly important when we're talking about brain cancer because of the so-called blood-brain barrier. The brain has to be sheltered from outside influences that might hitch a ride on the bloodstream and cause havoc. What is exciting and unique about cannabinoids is that they can pass through the blood-brain barrier because of their slippery, fat-loving nature. Cannabinoids get right into the brain's cancer cells by moving easily through the cell's membranes, which are also composed of lipids. The evidence is piling up in mice-infested labs that the endocannabinoid system, when stimulated by cannabinoids, has an anti-tumor effect and can instruct cancer cells to commit suicide.
This was done by Manuel Guzman's group within the past less than 10 years, and what they showed there was that originally that THC, when injected into a brain tumor in mice and rats, a significant number of those animals the tumor would regress and disappear, so that you actually had survival of rats that would otherwise die. And they examined all the surrounding nerve tissue, and that was all fine, because remember, once again, cannabinoids protect nerves.
Dr. Manuel Guzman is a professor of biochemistry and molecular biology in Madrid, Spain, and is known for his groundbreaking studies on medical cannabis.
Hemos observado que los cannabinoides tienen un efecto inductor de la muerte de las células tumorales, un efecto inhibidor de lo que es el crecimiento, la multiplicación de las células tumorales, lo que hacen es disminuir el crecimiento de los tumores.
喺美國，除咗由醫生發牌處方大麻為藥物之外，亦有人因為曾經患癌，但傳統西醫亦放棄嘅時候，之後發現大麻嘅功用，甚至自製大麻油醫自己，亦因為自己嘅經歷，成為民間用法嘅提倡者。
My name is Rick Simpson. I live at 344 Little Forks Road, just outside of Macan, Nova Scotia. I'm here to tell you about the most medicinal plant known to man, hemp. Oils made from the hemp plant are the most medicinally active substances ever found in nature. Up until about 85 years ago, hemp medicines were widely used all over the world. Many drug companies in the 1800s and early 1900s produced hemp medicines for decades. Hemp is a plant, and therefore it cannot be patented. To drug companies, no patent means no money, hence no interest in producing this drug. When you examine bud from the hemp plant, you can see that it is covered in resin. This resin makes the bud appear to be covered in frost. This resin is the medicine. When collected and processed properly, the resulting oil is an effective cure or control for practically any disease known to man, even cancer. We have supplied this oil to dozens of people with cancer. Even people who were diagnosed with terminal cancer by our medical system now have a clean bill of health after treatment with hemp medicine. When working with this medicine, medical miracles are a common occurrence.
But in a small Nova Scotia town, one man is trying to get the word out about what he says are the healing properties of hemp oil. But as Ross Lord explains, where he's spreading the word has created a major headache with no cure in sight.
In McCann, Nova Scotia, this oil is gaining a reputation as a miracle drug.
That's the cure right there.
Oil extracted from marijuana plants. Rick Simpson has been making it and giving it to friends and neighbors. He calls it hemp oil. Others know it as weed oil. In small doses, he says, it makes you well without getting you high.
Hemp oil containing THC has been touted as an effective treatment for many diseases, including cancer. But distributing THC, the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, is illegal. And that has some Nova Scotia users worried their supply of medicinal hemp oil will disappear. Global's Ray Bradshaw has the story.
I'm used to it.
Hemp oil is being used by some people in the McCann area of Nova Scotia to help in the treatment of cancer. Now they're worried their hemp oil will be taken away.
People are being very scared of the RCMP coming in their home and taking their medicine from them. And the whole community itself is living in fear down here, including my family.
That's because the hemp oil Rick Simpson is making contains THC, an illegal substance. He says there's medical proof that THC kills cancer cells. Rick Dwyer says Simpson's hemp oil cured his father's cancer and other diseases.
It took the fluid off his lungs. It repaired the prostate. It did so many things for him. He doesn't even take his insulin now for his diabetes because it controls his diabetes.
當然，由於係民間提煉法，有佢嘅危險性，所以佢絕對唔提議別人去做。
Due to the restrictions put in place by our government against this medicine, we feel that it is our duty to inform the public how they can make their own. In reality, this medicine should be produced on a grand scale in a controlled environment, using the highest quality starting material. Producing hemp medicine in this manner would stabilize the potency of this medication, plus any danger associated with this medicine's production could be eliminated. High-potency hemp oil can be produced right in your own home or workshop. Later in this video, we will show you how this can be accomplished observing simple rules of safety. We do not approve of or condone this method due to the safety issues involved, and we bear no responsibility if this information is misused. Sativa strains produce an oil that is a very good antidepressant and tends to energize a person. But most of the hemp oil I produce comes from indica strains. Indica strains tend to relax a person and give them more sleep. Rest and sleep are part of the healing process. Place the starting material, preferably good bud, in a plastic container. Dampen the bud material in the container with the solvent you are using. Then crush the bud material. After the bud has been crushed, add more solvent until the material is completely covered. I generally use pure naphtha, but 99% isopropyl alcohol also works well as a solvent, as do many other substances. Work and stir the contents to let the THC dissolve into the solvent. This process takes 2 to 3 minutes. Drain the solvent from the starting material and put it through a coffee filter. The solvent now resembles the color of gasoline due to the presence of the hemp oil in the solvent. Make sure the area where you are going to boil the solvent off is very well ventilated. The idea is to carry the fumes away from the boiling solvent to reduce the danger of an explosion or fire. Special care must be taken to avoid red-hot elements or a spark of any kind that could ignite the fumes from the solvent. I have found that an electric rice cooker boils the solvent off very effectively. Bring the solvent oil mix in the rice cooker to a boil. Use a fan to carry the fumes from the solvent away. As the solvent boils off, continue adding more solvent oil mix until it is gone. As the level in the boiling pot comes down for the last time, add 8 to 10 drops of water. Since the boiling point of water is much higher than the boiling point of the solvent used, this water that was added allows the solvent to be released as the oil thickens. As the last of the solvent is being released, it is a good idea to lift the rice cooker and keep the contents in the cooker moving. This helps release any remaining solvent and also protects the oil from too much heat. At no time should the temperature of the oil go over 290 degrees Fahrenheit. Gently pour the oil from the rice cooker into a small metal container. Put this container with the oil into a dehydrator, or put the container on a gentle heating device such as a coffee warmer. It may take a few hours to evaporate the water off the oil. In the end, there should be no bubbling or other activity on the surface of the oil. When the oil is hot, it is quite runny, but as it cools, the oil takes on the consistency of a thick grease. Generally, a pound of good hemp bud will produce about 2 ounces of high-grade oil. Ingesting this amount of oil over a 2 to 3 month period is enough to cure most serious cancers.
甚至喺互聯網盛行嘅今日，人民醒覺所帶嚟嘅壓力，連政府官方機構同主流傳媒亦唔可以唔承認大麻對癌症嘅功效。
California was the first state to make medical marijuana legal back in 1996. Now, for the first time ever, a federal agency has recognized that marijuana does have medical benefits. Last week, the National Cancer Institute added a summary of marijuana's possible benefits to its treatment database. It reads, quote, the potential benefits of medicinal, cannabis for people living with cancer include antiemetic, I hope I got that right, effects, appetite stimulation, pain relief, and improved sleep. In the practice of interactive oncology, the healthcare provider may recommend medicinal cannabis not only for symptom management, but also for its possible direct anti-tumor effect. So that's a lot of medical benefits. This new assessment from the National Cancer Institute could have an impact on the classification of marijuana as a Schedule I drug. That's the harshest possible drug degree classification. One of the main criteria for a Schedule I drug is that, quote, the drug or other substance has no currently accepted medical use in treatment in the United States. Now, if a federal agency is recognizing the medicinal benefits of marijuana, technically it shouldn't be moved down to a Schedule III drug. But a change of scheduling for pot could also mean an end to the federal government using a tax law loophole to put medical marijuana shops out of business. For years, the IRS has been citing Section 280E of the tax code that blocks medical shops from getting business tax deductions. It reads, quote, no deduction or credit shall be allowed for any amount paid if such trade or business consists of trafficking in controlled substances within the meaning of Schedule I and II of Controlled Substances Act. So if pot ends up becoming a Schedule III drug, this loophole that the feds are using would have no standing. Do you understand the importance of this? Then they could not bust all those shops that are selling marijuana. Finally, the government has admitted, you know what, medical marijuana does have benefits. Now, can we stop this madness?
但係同雙氧水一樣，大麻被壓抑嘅原因係因為佢易於自行栽植、廉價嘅特性，導致財閥們唔能夠再乘人之危，喺別人嘅疾病上不斷賺取龐大嘅金錢利益。歷史上，縱使大麻有住多方面嘅用途，佢哋亦都可以因住一己利益嘅緣故，一夜之間禁絕大麻所有用途都在所不惜。所以，對於善於製造問題、演繹問題、提供答案嘅財閥們，佢哋對大麻醫學用途嘅壓抑定必持續落去，所以縱使大麻喺醫藥上嘅療效顯著，但值得重申，香港唔同歐美各國，喺香港任何使用大麻同大麻油，就算係醫學用途，均屬違法行為。回顧過去 ，Freemason 用盡方法成為政治上嘅領袖，而事實上美國多任總統亦係來自 Freemason。原因佢哋一旦能夠通過法例，就可以將整個政府嘅所有資源作為己用，開動政府機器，令到人民所給予嘅稅收、權力同埋忠誠，亦都變成打壓佢哋自己嘅工具，令佢哋連接觸一種能夠幫助佢哋嘅植物嘅權利、祝福，亦都被奪去，只能夠成為銀行家、石油大亨嘅奴隸。
All available research has concluded that marijuana is dangerous to our health. Marijuana limits learning and memory perception and judgment and our ability to drive a car.
The war on marijuana is also a war on the sick and dying. Even after California and 5 other states overwhelmingly approved medical marijuana initiatives in the late 90s, federal government still plays hardball.
Despite these initiatives, we want to make clear that federal law still applies, and federal officials will continue to apply the law, and DEA officials will review cases, as they have, to determine whether to revoke the registration of any physician who recommends or prescribes so-called Schedule I controlled substances.
This is not a medical initiative. This is a legalization of drugs issue.
The federal government, by classifying marijuana in Schedule I, is saying that it has no medical uses, which is a bald-faced lie because it has 10,000 years in every culture of medical use.
It's impossible for a human to overdose and die, which is not true of alcohol, nicotine, barbiturates, or morphine. And it's a drug which humans can use under a wide variety of circumstances with safety.
They don't care if marijuana is the only drug that can alleviate your pain and suffering so that you can live longer, so that you can take your chemotherapy, so that you have a reasonable quality of life. They would rather fight the war on drugs even though they know that there are sick and dying patients being denied relief because of their position. Unconscionable.
藉住基督徒嘅禱告，終有一日 Freemason 過去嘅陰謀將會被揭露。而當大麻嘅藥用價值被認可以及合法應用嘅時候，人民將會追討呢班幾十年嚟為住金錢而泯滅人性，使到世界上無數人痛苦咁枉死喺各種疾病嘅 Freemason 銀行家嘅罪。
因為而家你睇翻網上去純意睇下世界上最原始嘅陰謀論呢，你會睇見呢，今時今日點解你要俾咁多錢去俾電郵？點解你會撞車會撞死？點解你架車要用咁多 CC 先推一個大笨象咁嘅車？而裏邊嘅 engine 竟然用金屬做嘅，殼又用金屬做嘅。但係如果成架車所有呢啲我所講嘅係用麻做嘅話呢，你而家佢誇口嘅唔係用一隻手指拎起一架單車，你用誇口就係我可以用一隻手拎起我成架車。你知唔知道啊？佢可以輕到咁。咁你諗下，如果輕到咁嘅話，即係輕過電單車，你話用幾多電油啫？但係問題連裏邊嘅電油都應該唔係用石油去做出嚟，係應該用周圍最野生、最粗生嘅麻去做出嚟嘅。咁嗰啲電油係世界上最平嗱，所以變咗你會睇到麻衣人咧，好明顯就係話佢點解係麻衣人啊？因為佢哋係換山酒啊嘛。OK， 佢換山酒佢咪識得用麻咯。OK， 又或者因為我講完呢篇信息之後，個個都知道點樣去將呢啲種植嘅麻織到變成一啲嘅麻衣人啦，係咪？但係問題肯定嗰班人佢唔需要用跟住嗰班經濟蠢豬咧去用翻呢一啲根本係完全俾人壟斷嘅一啲又貴又冇用嘅一啲嘅唔係石油就係石油嘅副產品嚇，一係就做醫藥，一係就做佢哋嘅能源。但係其實佢今日喺山裏面見到一棵麻，佢就已經好似荊棘咁咧，好易生到滿生係嘅。然後你就用一啲好簡單嘅方法，已經可以提煉佢成為你嘅第一，可以成為繩啦，成為細麻衣啦，成為衫啦，即係話又可以成為你嘅能源、你嘅食物同埋你嘅醫藥嘅，成為你嘅麻醉藥嘅，乜都得嘅。但你記住，你用係真係有危險嘅，濫用係有危險嘅。不過佢濫用佢嘅危險程度係絕對唔及得煙同酒咯。呢個係預先俾你知道。因為呢一個今日係一個醫學嘅根據嚟，到現時嚟講，你會睇到你上網睇下啲人係講話大麻係點樣可以刺激一隻嘅老鼠咧，去可以醫到自己嘅 cancer 啊，係可以使到嗰啲 cancer 細胞死啊。你睇翻呢啲嘅資料啊，我講緊嗰啲係諾貝爾得獎嘅或者係提名嘅醫生走出嚟講嘅噃。OK， 你睇翻呢啲資料，而家有 YouTube 㗎，你用翻呢啲嘅名去睇翻呢啲嘅資料，係咪？但係問題就如我所講啊，點解佢被禁止咧？佢被禁止唔係因為咧，佢濫用嘅時候係危險過酒同埋煙，亦唔係因為佢導致咧上癮呢一啲嘅現象，係因為喺經濟上影響呢個石油帝國嘅。OK， 所以呢個麻係最早嘅陰謀嚟嘅嚇。當然啦，我淨係講有一樣嘢能夠取替好多呢啲啫。當然，如果喺每一點當中你揾更好嘅，你可以有。但係以麻嚟講咧，佢係最多用途，係最多嘅可以話導致我哋而家呢個生活咧根本係可以話完全牢籠咗喺一個經濟奴隸底下。OK， 你諗下，如果你將佢愛嚟做屋， 即係做車即係其中一樣嘢啫嘛，做船只係其中一樣嘢啫嘛，做飛機都係只係其中一樣嘢啫嘛。你可以將佢做好多其他嘅物料咧。如果佢唔係被禁止嘅話咧，就好似我講緊一啲絲襪可以用嚟拉車噶嘛，係咪？即係惡意淘汰係咪？咁就會導致幾多人係根本賺極一切錢都係個奴隸。但係麻咧就係其中一樣咧，就係其實如果知陰謀論嘅話咧，如果你睇翻最早嘅陰謀論咧，其實最早就係麻開始嘅。
根據美國農業部喺1916年第404期刊指出，因為係1英畝工業大麻所出產嘅植物纖維紙張對比樹木要高出 4.1 倍，所以工業大麻係代替樹木成為壓緊板、刨花板同埋核心混凝土施工模具嘅完美材料。工業大麻係廉價嘅建築施工材料，具有防火、優良嘅隔熱及隔音性能。而對比水泥混凝土，工業大麻所做嘅混凝土竟然更為堅硬同埋耐用，而且因為植物纖維特有嘅彈性物質，唔似水泥混凝土咁樣比較容易脆裂，所以用工業大麻混凝土所做嘅房屋係具備有防地震嘅功能，因為對比水泥混凝土係更輕同埋更堅硬。工業大麻唔單止可以代替水泥混凝土，亦可以代替建築用嘅 PVC 膠水管，而且更耐用。而更為重要嘅，工業大麻係可再生嘅原料，唔會對環境造成污染。
It's legal in some countries to grow hemp for fiber. And in France, this woman whose name is France Perrier, Madame France Perrier, she builds about 300 houses a year using hemp and cement lime, and she makes a thing called isochandra. And she mixes the lime with hemp herbs, the leftover parts of the hemp plant after the fiber's been extracted. And hemp does this amazing thing. It turns to stone, it petrifies. And so when you mix the lime and hemp herbs together, you get something stronger than cement at 1/6 the weight.
C'est-à-dire que dans un premier temps, j'ai cherché à pétrifier les végétaux, c'est-à-dire à minéraliser les sèves. Et puis ensuite, j'ai trouvé des archéologues qui m'ont dit avoir vu des sites mérovingiens et des sites égyptiens qui avaient été vraisemblablement faits de ces mêmes techniques.
Madame Perrier has had thousands of prospective orders for her houses from all over Europe. But like so many others, she is held back only by the restrictions on hemp production.
So what we have here is the hemp shiv, or also called the hurd, which is the internal part of the stem of the plant. And that's mixed with a lime-based binder. And so with that lime-based binder and the hemp, we've got a negative carbon footprint. Now, the difference between lime and concrete is that lime you don't have to heat up as much. Concrete you have to heat up to almost 3,000 degrees, which takes a lot of energy and does very poorly on the carbon footprint.
Well, hempcrete actually sequesters carbon. Let me tell you how it does that. First of all, any cellulose material, wood for example, or hemp, takes carbon in during its life cycle, and usually when it decays, it lets it back into the atmosphere. If you take that plant and then put it into a wall, for example in hempcrete, then that carbon is now sequestered in the wall and not becoming part of climate change. So the hempcrete in this building, this one building alone, will sequester 20,000 pounds of carbon. That's a pretty big accomplishment. I think this is the best wall system in the world. So I'm all about hemp. I think hemp's an important thing to push because it's food, fiber, building material. But really, I'm choosing this material because it's the best in terms of building science. And why is that true? First of all, because this is what's often called a breathable wall system. And I don't mean breathable for air. We're actually building an airtight wall, but it's breathable for water. Why is that an advantage? Well, in a typical wall, you have a cavity that you seal tightly and then you fill with insulation. Well, water will get inside that cavity because water that's its job in the world. My body's 70% water. It can dissolve any material. Anyway, so what we want to do in a building is create a wall that welcomes water but doesn't rot when it lets the water in, and that's exactly what hempcrete does. When humidity changes in the air outside, the wall can take on that extra humidity and hold it until the humidity drops outside, and then it will let it back out. In the meantime, because the lime is wrapped around the cellulose, the cellulose won't rot.
The lime is trying to go back to being a rock. That means this wall is going to get harder and harder and harder. Over time, it's going to petrify. So these walls will last for thousands of years, not at 40 years like what we're used to building.
所以用大麻所做嘅各種產品，例如混凝土、膠水管、布料、汽車外殼、醫藥甚至燃料，明顯地都唔係一種廉價嘅代替品，而係世上最佳嘅原材料之一。相反，其他嘅原材料，例如石油、鋼鐵、棉花同埋玉米，先至係唔符合成本效益嘅昂貴代替品。只係一班銀行家同埋石油大王喺過去100年偷去人類使用最好原料嘅權利，使佢哋發大財，更令人類流入貧窮、落後、糧食短缺同埋污染當中。
即係所以點解聖經裏面咁得意講11個秘密嘅時候，就係我講 DNA 嘅陰謀啦。就係其實會用麻衣人咧嚇，因為麻衣本身就係一個可以話，如果你用任何方法去查，你試下就用個任何方法去查大麻啊、麻啊呢啲嘅字眼咧，你就會發覺係陰謀論噶啦，你走唔甩噶啦。你呢個直情用麻衣呢個字眼，用麻呢個字眼，你就只係會查到陰謀論最多呢啲嘅資料。OK， 我相信呢個就係神點解用麻衣人去形容呢一班將來會咧好活用麻嘅呢一班人嚇。因為點解？因為如果全球嗰陣時事件發生之後，你又知道咩係麻嘅話，你又識得唔濫用佢嘅話，我想你知道佢會對你嘅幫助，基本上可以將成個文明複製翻出嚟。OK， 我哋所講嘅任何而家文明裏邊嘅講嘅，會冇咗能源喎，哎呀冇咗醫藥喎，哎呀冇咗衫喎，種唔到棉喎，棉好矜貴嘅喎，係咪？冇咗繩喎，哎呀冇咗車喎，冇咗金屬喎，你咪淨係種麻可以根本出翻個社區出嚟嘅，直成。但你呢個社區絕對係慳錢過我哋而家所講嘅現代。我話你聽，如果你用麻去做一個 engine 同埋做一個車殼，我相信嗰架就係 Batman 嗰架車，係啊，又硬又撞唔爛，又可以拋起晒所有車都得，係咪？因為佢根本係好力噶嘛，係咪？或者 Batman 都係用緊呢啲做衫啦，我唔出奇啦，係咪？佢就係第一個麻衣人啦，可能。但係即係講笑啫。但係我想問你知道，我哋所見嘅嗰啲科幻嗰啲嘢啊，其實唔係咁科幻嘅，我哋只不過現代好低能啫嘛。OK， 係根本一路啲人係由得美國。即係呢一班禽獸咧，去壟斷咗我哋所講嘅經濟，但係又不學無術。OK， 見到少少呢一啲唔識嘅嘢咧，就當人哋係錯啫嘛。所以如果你感謝主啦，而家我哋睇個網絡根本係冇辦法禁止嘅。你嘗試去查下我而家所講嘅嘢咧，咁你就會知道我講緊乜嘢。所以變咗總括嚟講啦，咁你會睇到我哋深入晒所有嘢咧，你發覺其實我哋所講嘅信息咧，裏邊好多呢啲嘅伏線咧，其實神一早就擺咗喺裏邊噶啦嚇。即係譬如好似佢講毛衣人，如果你真係去 check 嘅話，咁而家就知道點解啦點解改咗用毛衣人，又唔係講麻衣人啊？係咪？因為麻衣人先至係真正嘅事實嚇。而最容易理解，總之就係嗰班人一定係好識得用麻嘅，而並且可能佢嘅生活當中只能夠咧係選擇用麻去製造佢生活當中一啲必需品嘅。OK， 所以叫佢哋做麻衣人咯。
啟示錄11章3至6節，我要使我那兩個見證人穿着毛衣，傳道1260天。他們就是那兩棵橄欖樹，兩個燈台，立在世界之主面前的。若有人想要害他們，就有火從他們口中出來，消滅仇敵。凡想要害他們的，都必這樣被殺。這二人有權柄，在他們傳道的日子，叫天閉塞不下雨，又有權柄叫水變為血，並且能隨時隨意用各樣的災殃攻擊世界。聖經啟示錄第11章提到兩個毛衣人會喺末後嘅大災難裏面出現，喺最後嘅3年半傳道，並且能夠用各種災殃攻擊敵基督嘅爪牙，同埋嗰啲敵擋神嘅人。歷世歷代以嚟，無論教會或者係外邦人，都希望能夠解開毛衣人身份嘅秘密。毛衣原文係麻衣，即係舊約祭司所穿着嘅白色細麻衣。毛衣人換言之，亦即係麻衣人。從希伯來書11章俾我哋知道，以往舊約嘅先知喺受窮乏、患難、苦害嘅日子，佢哋都需要喺曠野、山嶺披住羊皮漂流無定，以躲避惡人嘅追殺。事實上，披住羊皮嘅原因係因為當代社會嘅食物同埋衣着都可以取材自羊隻。但係點解到咗世界末後嘅兩位見證人會係着住麻衣呢？原來神喺聖經裏面早已引用麻衣人嚟預表末後一班成為啟示錄第11章所記載嘅兩個燈台嘅人。因為燈台嘅燈芯係用舊咗嘅祭司袍，祭司袍亦即係細麻衣。 亦都就係用優質幼細嘅麻線織成嘅袍子。而家我哋身處嘅並唔係主耶穌嘅時代，更唔係比主耶穌早2000年前用麻布製成衣服嘅時代。喺舊祭司時代用麻製成衣服，先知時代係用羊毛或者羊皮製成衣服。時至今日嘅現代社會，普遍用棉同埋人造纖維嚟製造衣服。咁樣點解喺末後會有成千上萬嘅人係着住麻衣嚟對抗敵基督呢？唔通呢個係聖經嘅錯誤？或者呢啲經文記載純粹只係預表呢？其實原來喺世界末後7年大災難嘅時候，當有一日敵基督完全壟斷咗世界嘅經濟同埋各個範疇嘅時候，甚至強制性推行植入獸印666晶片喺人嘅手上或者係喺額上，否則人都唔可以做買賣嘅時候，嗰個時代一班愛神嘅基督徒為住永恆嘅救恩，絕對唔會妥協植入獸印晶片。於是唔能夠購買日常生活嘅所需，例如能源、食物、醫藥甚至衣服等，而且會好似昔日嘅先知一樣，需要喺郊外同埋森林躲避天災或者敵基督嘅追捕。不過喺野外極唔容易揾到其他資源，但係麻卻係一種非常容易揾到嘅野生植物，繁殖栽種亦都非常容易。事實上，單以一種物料嚟計算嘅話，麻係具有最多嘅用途，可以製成各樣嘅物料。所以喺世界末後嘅7年大災難，喺敵基督出現之後，聖經所預言嘅毛衣人即係麻衣人，就需要用原始嘅生活方式喺山間野外生活。縱使佢哋只係現代人，但係會因為重新認識麻嘅驚人用途，用麻製造衣服，成為一班着住麻衣嘅人。實在神藉住2012信息啟示咗有關麻嘅用途，人就可以重新認識麻嘅真正用處。假如正值7年大災難，即使全世界抵制中國，中國亦都能夠單單藉住種植麻，使整個經濟復甦，重建一個繁榮嘅社會。以麻呢種最簡單嘅方法嚟恢復能源、經濟、醫藥、建築、交通同埋製造出人類大部分嘅生活必需品，
就唔係披着羊皮換山酒咯。OK 佢哋唔係話有羊俾佢哋劏啦，成啦，係咪？咁所以變咗呢一個，我相信就係係其中一個極之可能真係神形容一個嘅團體或者一班嘅人，佢哋根本係已經離開咗呢啲陰謀裏面所為佢哋製造嘅壓制社區同埋無知咁而事實上，我相信第日中國如果成為一個基督教國家咧，咁佢相信佢裏面好多都係麻衣人，係咪？即係特登做多啲麻出嚟去紀念翻佢哋曾經有成半個世紀俾人哋佢哋惡意淘汰，將地球嘅資源差唔多用盡啊！你諗下，而家我哋所講嘅所有嘢，地球嘅污染，如果你用麻油嘅話，你根本就當然唔係芝麻油啦，即係用大麻做出嚟嘅油嘅話，你啲車點會有咩污染啫？
啟示錄19章8節，就蒙恩得穿光明潔白的細麻衣，這細麻衣就是聖徒所行的義。細麻衣嘅原料係嚟自中東地區嘅一種麻樹亞麻，屬亞麻科植物，不論係大麻、亞麻同柱麻，都係屬於麻嘅一種。亞麻係喺全球各地廣泛栽培嘅植物，起源於近東地中海沿岸，係一種優良嘅紡織同油料作物。亞麻纖維喺紡織工業中有着重要嘅用途。亞麻纖維具有拉力強、柔軟、細度好、導電弱、吸水效果與揮發水分效果快、膨脹率大等等特點。亞麻布服裝比其他衣料能減輕人體嘅出汗。亞麻紡織品嘅吸水速度比綢緞、人造絲織品甚至比棉布快幾倍。亞麻衣服具有冬暖夏涼嘅特點。蘇聯喺戰爭時期，士兵們反映喺艱苦嘅戰爭環境中，穿其他衣料嘅人長虱子，而穿亞麻衣服嘅卻不長虱子。亞麻布具有抑菌功能。古代埃及法老嘅木乃伊都係被裹喺驚人結實嘅亞麻細布內，使之完整咁保存至今。古代以色列人就知道亞麻嘅減輕體寒嘅作用，所以細麻布係祭司重要嘅衣服。佢哋頭上要戴細麻布裹頭巾，身穿細麻布褲子，致使身體唔出汗。喺古代埃及，細麻衣係一種好尊貴嘅衣服。 只有地位崇高嘅人先至能夠穿着。喺創世記記載，當法老要高升約瑟時，法老就係俾約瑟穿上貴重嘅細麻衣。創世記41章41至42節，法老又對約瑟說：我派你治理埃及全地。法老就摘下手上列印的戒指，戴在約瑟的手上，給他穿上細麻衣，把金鏈戴在他的頸項上。另一方面，大麻又稱漢麻，中國各地對大麻名稱各有不同，如火麻、雲麻等。大麻呢一種一年生草本植物嘅韌皮纖維，亦都係最早用作紡織纖維嘅品種之一。佢可作為纖維產品、服裝、繩索、船帆、油脂、紙張及醫療用品嘅原材料。但傳統上，大麻一直普遍用嚟製造繩索嘅纖維。直到近年紡織技術提升後，大麻服飾嘅舒適性先至真正被發掘出嚟。大麻纖維嘅強度係各種天然纖維中最高嘅，只係大麻嘅缺點係大麻原纖維嘅長度係各種麻纖維中最短嘅，因而紡織難度亦都最大。
所以你而家幼稚到啲人話，有冇用葵花籽油啊？好多嗰啲去走去做車嗰啲引擎，咁你不如睇翻少少嘅資料，半個世紀前人哋點樣行車啦。
葵花籽又叫葵瓜子，係向日葵嘅果實，佢嘅籽仁裏面含脂肪30% 至45%，最多可達60%。葵花籽油顏色金黃，澄清透明，氣味清香，係歐洲人、俄羅斯人嘅主要食用油。佢含有大量亞麻酸等人體必需嘅不飽和脂肪酸，可以促進人體細胞嘅再生同埋成長，保持皮膚健康，並且能夠減少膽固醇喺血液中嘅淤積，係一種高級營養油。葵花籽油同其他植物油類一樣，可以成為柴油汽車所使用嘅生物柴油。方法非常簡單，可以用新鮮或者以用作煮食嘅葵花籽油。如果用以作煮食用途嘅葵花籽油，就需要先用網過濾，再將葵花籽油加熱至120至130度攝氏嘅溫度煮大約4小時，就已經可以直接加入柴油汽車嘅油缸裏面，混合柴油一齊使用，用以減輕柴油成本。
Before you begin making your biodiesel homebrew, follow these simple steps and find out how to filter your used cooking oil and ensure a good batch of biodiesel. You will need used cooking oil, a filter, a collection barrel, a biodiesel processor, and a tank thermometer. Step 1. Collect your oil. You can spend the extra money and buy new cooking oil, or you can find a restaurant and ask them if you can take their used cooking oil off their hands. Used cooking oil will have a darker color to it and will most likely have chunks of your favorite fried foods floating around. You will need to get rid of these mystery chunks before making your biodiesel homebrew. Step 2. Chunk removal. Filtering your used cooking oil will eliminate the chunks of food and other particles before you begin your biodiesel homebrew process. Larger chunks can contain water and can mess up your biodiesel reaction. Smaller suspended particles should also be allowed to settle so they don't attach to your heating element and muck up your processor. As you pour out your used cooking oil, let it run completely through the filter. The filter doesn't need to be too fine. A paint strainer or window screen will adequately remove the particles that are large enough to affect the biodiesel reaction. You will notice large chunks of fried mystery food collecting in the filter. This filtration process can be fairly quick, but you can let the filtered biodiesel settle anywhere from a couple of hours to a couple of days to let the smaller particles settle out. Once settling is complete, begin transferring your used cooking oil to the reaction tank on your processor. Step 3. Tank transfer. Take the hose that connects the collection barrel to the reaction tank on your biodiesel processor and connect it to the pump. Open up the valve on the reaction tank and open up the valve on the bottom of the collection barrel. To activate the transfer, simply turn on the pump on your processor. You will notice the dark used cooking oil traveling out of the bottom of the collection barrel, through the pump, through the processor, and up into the hose that empties into the reaction tank. Step 4. The heat is on. As your cooking oil makes its way into the reaction tank, you need to heat up the oil to about 120 or 130 degrees Fahrenheit. During the heating process, the pump on your compressor will circulate the oil. Circulating and heating the oil distributes the heat and prevents the oil from getting too hot right near the heating element. This heating and circulation process will take approximately 1 to 4 hours, depending on how much oil you are heating, the initial temperature of the oil, the outside air temperature, insulation on the processor, and how powerful your heating element is. Congratulations! You've just properly filtered your used cooking oil and can begin your biodiesel homebrew process. By choosing to use an alternative fuel, you've helped to cut down on CO2 emissions, cut dependence on foreign oil, and saved yourself some money. Nice work.
但係以上嘅做法會留低葵花籽裡面嘅甘油，即係脂肪酸 （fatty acid）， 而帶酸性嘅脂肪酸會慢慢腐蝕金屬做嘅汽車引擎，所以要得到更佳效果，就要直接使用喺汽車上面，唔需要配合普通柴油使用。但係將葵花籽油或者大麻籽油，又或者任何曾經用作煮食嘅植物油，變為生物柴油嘅話，就要用化學方法將甘油去除。
Biodiesel is a more eco-friendly diesel fuel that's made from vegetable oil or animal fat. Unlike regular diesel and gasoline, producing biodiesel doesn't require petroleum. Instead, the raw materials are locally available and can be recycled from waste. If your car has a diesel engine, it can run on biodiesel fuel, usually without requiring any modifications. While biodiesel and petroleum diesel are similar in energy efficiency and fuel economy, biodiesel is more eco-friendly. For starters, it can be made from what would otherwise have been waste. For example, from vegetable oil from the kitchen of your local fast food joint. The restaurant simply discards its used fryer oil in a receptacle out back. Every few days, a vacuum truck comes by to collect it. In its current state, the oil contains water and food particles, making it unusable for biodiesel production. So the truck transports it to a filtering plant. There, they pump the oil into a holding tank, then heat it up to draw out the water. Once they drain the water, the oil is ready to enter a multi-stage filtering process. First, the oil goes through a vibrating sieve, which strains out the larger pieces of debris. After this first filtering, the oil is already visibly cleaner. Next, it passes through a second vibrating sieve. This one has a finer mesh, therefore it catches smaller particles of debris. After this second stage, the oil looks clean, but still contains microscopic debris. So it enters the third and final filtering stage, passing through 20 ultrafine filter cloths which trap any particle larger than 1 micron in size. A micron is about 80 times smaller than the width of a human hair. The captured debris leaves a muddy residue on the filters. That vegetable oil, which once deep-fried potatoes, is now ready to cook up some diesel fuel. Another source of oil for making biodiesel is beef tallow, oil derived from cow fat. Biodiesel producers typically buy tallow from facilities like this one, which specialize in cleaning cowhides for leather tanneries. Sharp revolving blades shear off the fat from the back of the hide. The fat drops onto a conveyor, which moves it into a steam injection cook tank. The tank heats the fat to a gentle boil, extracting the oil. Everything else leaves the tank and drops into a waste container. The oil moves onward, passing through a two-stage filtration process. Whether the raw material is vegetable oil or beef tallow, the biodiesel producers refer to this main ingredient as feedstock. When the feedstock arrives at the biodiesel plant, it goes into a holding tank until production time. This demonstration illustrates the production recipe. They take the feedstock and combine it with methanol, a type of wood alcohol, as well as with a catalyst, which triggers a chemical reaction. A processing unit mixes everything thoroughly while applying heat and pressure. The resulting chemical reaction produces a harmless byproduct, glycerin, a common ingredient in soaps and cosmetics. Processing consumes much of the methanol. Then they remove even more, leaving just a tiny percentage of it in the finished biodiesel. To ensure their fuel meets international regulatory standards, the plant's quality control lab samples from each production run. In this flammability test, they heat the fuel to 275 degrees Fahrenheit, then apply a flame to see whether the gases ignite. If they do, they have to remove more methanol to make the fuel safe. If they don't ignite, the fuel meets international safety standards. Biodiesel costs more at the pump, but emits significantly less carbon dioxide and monoxide, and 85% fewer cancer-causing agents into the air we breathe.
你知唔知嗰陣時嘅電油講緊段毫子1加侖嘅咋，1-2毫子1加侖嘅咋，你知唔知啦？但係嗰陣時都唔夠麻油平，而倒落海㗎，你諗下，而家用嘅最新嘅方法製造能夠提煉嘅麻油，諗下會更加平過嗰陣時1-2毫子1加侖嗰啲嘅電油啦啩，係咪啊？咁所以，但係因為總之麻喺任何地方都種得到嘅，咁所以你要睇到喺加拿大好多時佢哋嗰啲屋咧係會直情成間屋租咗之後咧，就喺屋裏邊係種啲麻啫嘛。就好多時用呢啲嘅方法。
加拿大應否允許大麻合法化，成為2013年政壇同民間討論嘅熱點問題之一。加拿大政壇多位政治人物承認曾經吸食大麻，包括新民主黨黨領袖穆克雷爾以及自由黨黨領袖賈斯丁特魯多。當加拿大總理哈柏喺被問到有冇食過大麻嘅時候，佢反問記者話：我睇落似食大麻嘅人咩？佢仲講佢自己從細已經有哮喘病，所以從來唔會考慮吸食大麻或者食煙。哈柏政府作出一項針對藥用大麻使用嘅新規定，從2013年10月1號開始，唔再批准個人種植藥用大麻。所有需要藥用大麻嘅病人要向聯邦政府批准嘅供應商購買。加拿大聯邦衛生部部長喺2013年6月份頒布咗呢項嘅命令，規定由2014年4月起，所有私自種植大麻嘅人都將會被視為違法。據統計，全加拿大目前擁有種植大麻許可證嘅病人高達37400人。加拿大政府稱，希望將小型嘅藥用大麻種植模式變成大規模嘅商業銷售模式，咁樣政府就可以對大麻嘅品質同買賣進行監管。不過，亦有人質疑呢個新政策嘅效果，特別會令日後藥用大麻嘅花費可能會提高。雖然大部分國家都將私人種植大麻列入非法行為，但仍有為數不少嘅人冒住違法嘅風險喺屋企裏邊種植大麻作販賣或者私人用途。而通常警方能夠發現有人喺室內種植大麻，都係由於發現一戶嘅用電量同屋內嘅人口不符，因為舊式屋內種植大麻需要用太陽燈嚟代替日光，於是大量用電。但而家已經有人開始使用慳電嘅 LED 燈代替太陽燈種植大麻。
好，另外再来看台北市林森北路酒店区，最近出现了茶叶带大麻烟。调查局追查来源，发现毒贩原来是在汐止租了透天豪宅，而且是无师自通的来种大麻，从播种、栽培、烘干到分装贩售，全部自己包办，赚取相当惊人的暴利，出入都以400多万的名车来代步。不过呢，也因此让办案人员容易跟监。昨天展开围捕，顺利的破获了这个大麻工厂。
小风站，日光灯有足，大麻又出。
大麻工厂设备应有尽有，室内搭起帐篷，悬挂一整排聚光灯，每天照大麻8到12小时，还用电扇对着吹。地上摆放粗粗的抽风管，让温室维持通风良好状态。
正在晾干的啊。种子。
从幼苗栽种到开花烘干，都在这栋透天豪宅里完成。调查局搜证3个多月展开攻坚，但毒贩尝试逃走。办案人员开车拦路，硬是挡住这辆名贵休旅车。驾驶座走下一名穿白 T 恤和格纹短裤的男子，就是曾姓嫌犯。他还狡辩来这里只是找朋友。
拦下来了。
专案小组最初调查时，以为曾姓男子是一般毒品中盘商，但跟监发现他购买特殊形状的照明灯以及肥料、杀虫剂，加上豪宅明明只有他一人使用，每个月电费居然都破万，这才发觉他精通园艺，上网查资料就学会种大麻，从播种到收成完全不找助手，赚再多也不必分给别人。
出入啊，都做这种保时捷的，价值高达400多万的这种休旅车啊，然后这个出手阔绰。
大麻烟100公克的市价高达10到15万元，在装进茶叶袋伪装成高山茶之后，就卖到林森北路一带的酒店。现在嫌犯落网，接着就要追查大麻种子的来源。
大麻的问题现在也很严重，又有人在豪宅种大麻，他们是利用郊区的别墅区来作为栽种大麻的处所，并且用灯光还有温控的设施来加速这些大麻的生长，成功栽培之后就分装贩售，谋取暴利。
警方接获线报，进入汐止的这栋豪宅别墅，屋内满满都是正在培育的大麻树，数量之大令警方讶异。嫌犯还为了过滤出入分子，还加装监视器，企图躲避警方查缉。
这些大麻的话，他们种植大概将近2年。他们大麻种子的来源是透过国外的网站以网购的方式取得之后，在国内做种植。
这个大麻培育集团手法专业，利用日光灯、2氧化碳瓶让大麻树行光合作用，并利用除湿机及相关的控温设备调节温度与湿度，快速培育大麻。成功后就分装销售，谋取暴利。集团不法获利高达数千万元。台北县警方同一时间也侦破利用豪宅培育大麻的集团，带头的美籍男子平日从事英语教学及翻译，工作之余就在新店自家3区豪宅举办摇头派对，销售自制大麻毒品。警方经过半年的跟监，一举逮捕归案，并查获518公克大麻成品和半成品，以及新式毒品蘑菇数10颗。这些贩毒集團也都依違反毒品製造販賣罪嫌，全都移送法辦。
咁但係當然係犯法啦。咁但係而家咧，美國有好多州咧係已經係大麻合法化㗎啦。
大麻同海洛因、鴉片一樣都係毒品嘅一種。根據危險藥物條例，大麻同大麻樹枝均屬危險藥物種類，因吸食、種植、販賣大麻而被捕、定罪嘅亦常有所聞。而大麻同迷幻藥亦成為1960年代西方反社會嬉皮士嘅迷失標記。喺過去，因住最早嘅 Freemason 陰謀，各國都視大麻為毒品，並且嚴加打擊。但對比大麻喺過去幾千年嚟都係合法使用，被禁嘅時間只係近幾十年。喺過去，美國政府甚至曾經鼓勵農夫種植大麻。
Long ago, when these ancient Grecian temples were new, hemp was already old in the service of mankind. For thousands of years even then, this plant had been grown for cordage and coarse cloth in China and elsewhere in the East. For centuries prior to about 1850, all the ships that sailed the western seas were rigged with hempen rope and sails. For the sailor, no less than the hangman, hemp was indispensable. A 44-gun frigate, like our cherished old Ironsides, took over 60 tons of hemp for rigging, including an anchor cable 25 inches in circumference. The Conestoga wagons and prairie schooners of pioneer days were covered with hempen canvas. Indeed, the very word canvas comes from the Arabic word for hemp. In those days, hemp was an important crop in Kentucky and Missouri. Then came cheaper imported fibers for cordage, like jute, sisal, and manila hemp, and the culture of hemp in America declined. But now, with Philippine and East Indian sources of hemp in the hands of the Japanese, and shipment of jute from India curtailed, American hemp must meet the needs of our Army and Navy, as well as of our industries. In 1942, patriotic farmers, at the government's request, planted 36,000 acres of seed hemp, an increase of several thousand%. The goal for 1943 is 50,000 acres of seed hemp.
然而，由於大麻用途廣泛、廉價，直接影響各財閥，包括杜邦化工同埋標準石油嘅利益，因此財閥們就以大麻可以被作為藥物濫用嘅特性，以製造問題、演繹問題、提供答案嘅方式，一次過將大麻掃除。佢哋除咗喺報章製造輿論，指墨西哥人到美國後，佢哋濫藥嚴重，佢哋所濫用嘅係邪惡嘅野草。於1935年、1936年代，更以大麻另一個嘅名稱 marijuana 為題材，拍攝多套濫用大麻產生禍害嘅電影。於是1937年，美國政府通過法案禁制 marijuana。全國醫生協會喺最後關頭先至提出反對。代表 Dr. William Woodward 表示 marijuana 並唔係大麻嘅常用名詞，因此甚至常常處方大麻嘅醫生亦唔知道法案所指嘅 marijuana 係大麻。雖然全國醫生協會其後繼續反對，但直至1939年，由於有3000名醫生被控非法處方大麻，最終全國醫生協會亦妥協，最後只有3名醫生被控。亦因為呢一條歷時幾十秒辯論所通過嘅法例，一種有多種用途嘅植物一夜間被禁絕。而聯合國更係直至1961年先至禁制大麻，將大麻列入麻醉品單一公約嘅名單之內。
The book also takes us on a journey of the bizarre, the curious origin of marijuana prohibition. Only in the 20th century did the ancient hemp plant become a frightening new drug. The Mexican slang word, marijuana, was unknown to most Americans until it began appearing in newspaper headlines early in the century. Marijuana horror stories, works of pure fiction, were staples of the sensationalistic newspapers owned by William Randolph Hearst. But even respectable papers printed outrageous tales. Although this story would be relegated to the tabloids today, it was fit to print in the distinguished New York Times on July 6, 1927. A Mexican woman and her 4 children are driven insane by marijuana, the New York Times reported. It went on to say that neighbors rushed to the house to find the entire family insane.
It is convinced that he is hopelessly and incurably insane, a condition caused by the drug marijuana to which he was addicted. It is recommended, Your Honor, that the defendant be placed in an institution for the criminally insane for the rest of his natural life.
The next tragedy may be that of your daughter, or your son, or yours, or yours, or yours.
Although alcohol prohibition required a constitutional amendment, marijuana prohibition was brought about by a single federal law, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. The driving force behind this law was Harry J. Anslinger, America's first drug czar. Anslinger was the government's expert witness during 1937 congressional hearings on the proposed Marijuana Tax Act. As proof of marijuana's malevolence, Anslinger introduced into evidence the bogus Hearst newspaper headlines that trumpeted the violence, insanity, and death allegedly caused by marijuana.
In 1937, when the Marijuana Tax Act was established, there were no data of any sort, much less scientific, about whether this compound was harmful or not. There was just evidence it was being used by people whom we distrusted and feared, and that it was associated with lower class people.
You go back and read the record in Congress, it's amazing the lack of information. There were literally questions by members of Congress saying, what is this marijuana? Is it a narcotic or what is it? And there would be a sentence, someone would stand up and say, oh, it's the most dangerous new drug coming down the pipe.
In terms of what Congress knew in 1937, they didn't know any of that history. The only history that they were given was all these cock and bull stories about how it made people crazy and they went out and killed people under the influence of marijuana.
The Tax Act was built on lies, and I think it's outrageous that we have legislation that still exists today it was based on lies.
Despite opposition by the American Medical Association, Congress passed the law unanimously after debating for a grand total of 90 seconds. President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed it into law on August 3, 1937. Theoretically, the new law did not actually prohibit marijuana and hemp. Only a constitutional amendment could do that. But by imposing prohibitive taxes and mountains of red tape, it made cultivation, processing, sales, and any use of the hemp plant whatsoever virtually impossible. Technically, farmers could still legally grow a hemp plant like this one, but only if they could somehow grow it without the leaves and flowers. This law is still in effect today. The full reasons behind marijuana prohibition are still being debated. Some experts think racism played a part.
So that when poor people, immigrants, take the drugs, we're afraid they're going to rise up, smite, steal, and take the white women. And so we outlaw the drugs because of our fears over that.
Others think Harry Anslinger was motivated by ambition and power.
A great deal of the reason that marijuana was prohibited was because of self-aggrandizement at the federal level, especially with Harry Anslinger wanting to be the J. Edgar Hoover of his own agency.
Jack sees darker motives. His book alleges a high-level conspiracy revolving around Anslinger, Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon, the DuPont Chemical Company, and hemp. Before the Civil War, hemp was the nation's second largest cash crop behind cotton. But while cotton could be processed by machine, slaves were the only cost-effective way to separate the tough hemp fiber from the pulpy core that was used to make paper. When slavery ended after the war, the hemp industry went into decline. The death knell was sounded in the late 1800s when paper makers converted to tree-based pulp.
It meant that you could chop down a forest a lot cheaper than you could pay laborers to manufacture hemp fiber for paper.
Jack hangs his conspiracy angle on events that happened simultaneously with marijuana prohibition. Coincidence number one. A German immigrant invented a machine called the decorticator. This new mechanical processing device was about to bring hemp into the modern industrial age. Popular Mechanics magazine recognized the potential bonanza for American farmers and entrepreneurs. This article heralded a machine that could process hemp quickly and cheaply for the first time in history. Coincidence number two. The DuPont company in the 30s came out with both a sulfuric acid method for making paper from trees and a new invention called plastic. Jack's book points out that a hemp resurgence would certainly have been a serious threat to DuPont's petrochemical strategies. And finally, there's millionaire financier Andrew Mellon. Mellon was Anslinger's boss, Harry's wife's uncle, and DuPont's banker. Coincidences number 3, 4, and 5.
但由於大麻喺醫療方面嘅療效顯著，以及隨住互聯網普及，人民開始接觸到真實嘅歷史，佢哋抗拒財閥們為住金錢嘅利益而犧牲人民嘅幸福，所帶嚟嘅無理嘅法例同埋壟斷，開始爭取大麻合法化。例如，一項為期長達44年嘅民意調查指出，美國接近60%嘅美國人認同大麻合法化。
How quickly we as a culture can change our minds. For the first time ever, a Gallup poll shows a majority of Americans favor legalizing marijuana by, you can see the numbers, it's a pretty big gap. In the poll just conducted, 58% answered yes, legalize pot. 39% said no. Now, look at how opinion has suddenly turned around. This is pretty interesting here because you see the bottom line, that's the kind of the lime green line. That's the percentage favoring legalized pot. And you can see over the course of time, the x-axis is the years, the very end being 2013, suddenly spikes upward. You see, again, 58% now favor legalization, including this recent convert.
早於1996年，美國加州早已容許醫生處方大麻俾病人，其後各個州份跟隨，包括最新簽署法例嘅伊利諾州，共有20個州份，加上華盛頓特區容許醫藥用大麻。近年更擴展到全面合法階段，科羅拉多州同埋華盛頓州已經通過法例，讓人合法使用、販賣大麻。美國政府司法部更明言，唔會對兩州採取法律行動，變相為各州大麻合法化開綠燈。亦因此，美國有農夫開始種植大麻。
For the first time in 55 years, there's a hemp harvest in the United States.
I dreamed of this day for many, many years, and to see this right now gives me chills.
Hemp advocates see opportunity in the crop that is used for fiber to make rope, clothes, keychains, and bracelets. Volunteer harvesters who drove hours to southern Colorado tout it as a biofuel that can be ingested.
I'm a hemp chef. I cook with industrial hemp. I make breads, oatmeals, cookies.
Hemp is a cousin to the better-known marijuana plant. Growing it remains illegal under federal law. But Colorado farmers, bolstered by the feds saying they won't step in after voters legalized marijuana and hemp, harvested 25 fields.
Amendment 64, and that really kind of opened the country's eyes to marijuana, and that opened the door for the legislature for hemp to be able to be, planted.
After farmers were encouraged to grow hemp during World War II, it was last grown in 1958.
It looks kind of piddly, if you will.
Laughlin and other farmers are starting from scratch. This field is being harvested by hand.
至於國際方面，比利時、加拿大、捷克共和國、荷蘭同以色列都可以合法使用大麻作為藥用用途。南美國家烏拉圭亦通過咗法例，預備將大麻合法化。
南美洲国家乌拉圭的众议院周三以微弱多数通过了一项具争议的大麻合法化法案，为国家创建合法大麻市场踏出关键第一步。众议院就是否通过成立官方大麻机构，专责发放生产大麻牌照以及监管相关买卖进行辩论。经过13个小时的争辩后，执政联盟广泛阵线全部50名成员一致投赞成票，压倒在野派46张反对票，通过这一项具有争议性的提案。
而其他國家不同組織亦發起大麻合法化嘅運動，例如加拿大。奧地利、愛爾蘭、
因為點解？因為已經慢慢呢個教育已經開始普及嚇，所以我哋講嘅有啲嘅名人呢，都其實佢哋自己唔做佢哋自己嗰啲 CEO 啊或者經理呢位呢，就走咗去搞呢啲嘅生意啊，就去造福人群啊，愛嚟醫 cancer 啊。
實在處身喺呢個世界嘅末後時代，撒旦所操控嘅共濟會喺過往數百年嚟喺世界推行種種嘅陰謀，將好多基督教真正嘅信仰、世上嘅真知識、醫藥、科技同埋經濟等等嘅資訊，都以壟斷同壓抑手段，將原本係神俾人類嘅祝福隱瞞咗，甚至定下好多唔公平嘅制度同埋法律嚟限制人類接觸或者應用呢啲嘅知識。例如喺1996年開始，日華牧師曾經分享醫藥陰謀、科技陰謀、免費能源陰謀同埋惡意淘汰陰謀等信息。好多治療重症、癌症同埋免費能源對人有益嘅方法，都被 Freemason 背後所控制嘅西醫霸權、石油帝國、美國食品藥品管理局同埋國際政治上所抹殺咗。甚至有人應用呢啲知識嘅時候，仲會違反咗地上嘅法例。作為一個基督徒，遇到呢啲知識嘅時候，應該存住點樣嘅心態呢？羅馬書13章1至5節，在上有權柄的，人人當信服他，因為沒有權柄不是出於神的，凡掌權的都是神所命的。 所以抗拒掌權的，就是抗拒神的命；抗拒的，必自取刑罰。作官的原不是叫行善的懼怕，乃是叫作惡的懼怕。你願意不懼怕掌權的嗎？你只要行善，就可得他的稱讚，因為他是神的用人，是與你有益的。你若作惡，卻當懼怕，因為他不是空空的佩劍，他是神的用人，是伸冤的，刑罰那作惡的。所以你們必須信服，不但是因為刑罰，也是因為良心。彼得前書2章12至15節，你們在外邦人中，應當品行端正，叫那些毀謗你們是作惡的，因看見你們的好行為，便在監察的日子歸榮耀給神。你們為主的緣故，要順服人的一切制度，或是在上的君王，或是君王所派罰惡賞善的臣宰，因為神的旨意原是要你們行善，可以堵住那糊塗無知人的口。明顯咁，聖經已經俾我哋指引點樣面對被地上法律限制嘅知識。第一點，基督徒嘅本分應當遵守呢啲嘅法律，唔應該犯法。就好似根據香港法例當中危險藥物條例第11段，大麻同大麻樹枝均屬危險藥物種類，種植、購買、吸食或者應用大麻類嘅產品都係違法，甚至喺網絡上訂購任何大麻類嘅產品都係違法。事實上，作為一個基督徒，唔應該煽動或者鼓勵任何人士作出任何違反香港法例嘅行為，包括喺香港呢片土地裏面濫用任何危險藥品。第二點，我哋應該喺神面前為到呢啲遭壓抑嘅知識同埋陰謀去代禱，求神開拓出路，改變現存唔公平嘅法律。因為撒旦就係最害怕基督徒懂得代禱呢個方法。事實上，呢個亦係錫安教會分享呢啲遭被壓抑嘅資訊同埋陰謀嘅原因。正如1996年日華牧師開始分享醫藥陰謀嘅時候，當時香港嘅中醫、自然醫學、維他命營養保健食品等都唔被重視，並且得唔到法例認可。結果，當錫安教會嘅弟兄姊妹為到呢啲現象代禱後，冇幾耐，香港又持續出現眾多西醫醜聞被揭發。結果，中醫同埋自然療法嘅地位亦逐步被廣大市民認知，以及獲得法律認可。第三點，依從正確途徑應用所認識到嘅知識，或者我哋自己或者身邊親友遇到一啲嚴重或者會致死嘅疾病嘅時候，縱使有需要應用到呢啲被壓抑嘅知識，亦都應該遷往去到外國一啲可以合法應用呢啲方法嘅地方，先至可以應用。因為好多遭禁制應用嘅國家或者城市，就算私下應用，最終都可能被法律制裁，而結果都係用唔到嘅。相反，現時神給予我哋嘅生活環境同埋條件，根本係可以自由去外地旅行。所以應該從正途採用呢啲知識，絕對唔應該毫無智慧咁樣以身試法，有失基督徒嘅美好見證同埋榜樣，並且有違聖經向基督徒給予順服地上政治法制嘅指示。咁樣先至係作為一個基督徒為神作見證嘅態度。縱然我哋身處嘅處境好似昔日嘅約瑟一樣，遭到唔公平嘅壓抑、被限制，甚至被屈枉而坐監，終有一日神都可以改變，使我哋成為掌權者。腓立比書1章27節，只要你們行事為人與基督的福音相稱，叫我或來見你們，或不在你們那裏，可以聽見你們的境況，知道你們同有一個心志，站立得穩，為所信的福音齊心努力。帖撒羅尼迦前書2章10節，我們向你們信主的人是何等聖潔、公義，無可指責，有你們作見證，也有神作見證。
好啦，咁感言部分，我相信大家聽咗呢一篇信息，更加理解咗麻衣人啊真正嘅身份啦，係咪？佢真正嘅身份，咁喺聖經裏面，我相信呢，對於其他人嚟講，簡直好似個謎啦；對於我哋嚟講，簡直佢個資料關於佢嘅，可以有佢嘅身世啊，佢要識嘅嘢啊，佢要做嘅嘢啊，佢會遇到嘅嘢啊，我哋都好仔細去理解咗啦。因為原來神用嘅字眼呢，雖然少，雖然短，但係問題呢，聽落呢，其實佢隱藏係一樣嘢，就係 佢聽落好似唔合理嘅，因為好似而家我哋講到就話，哇喺將來喺未來嘅日子，係而家我哋講現代嘅日子，竟然會有人着麻衣嘅，係咪？我哋棉嘅衫都嫌佢鞋啦，有陣時係咪吉身啦，係咪？點解會着麻衣咧？咁而家我哋就因為呢篇信息就理解咗啦。嗱，但係問題咧，值得提嘅就係話喺去到而家，我哋呢個時候有少少嘅資料咧，我想同大家 update 嘅。第一樣就係咩咧？最主要就係其實如果我哋睇到呢啲陰謀咧，我哋睇見啦，一邊咧佢其實將全人類咧由正常人削弱到我哋嘅生命咧，係可以話係一班病菌啦嚇，即係亦並且係一班窮光蛋啦，係咪？我哋又成為一班奴隸啦。咁變咗呢一班所謂精英咧，佢哋會喺知識上啊，喺佢哋嘅財富上啊，佢哋擁有嘅權力上啊，都能夠控制人類，好似控制一個牧場咁啊。咁但係問題就係咁啦，問題就係話原來咧喺歷代歷世以嚟，我哋睇見呢啲陰謀咧，佢其實唔單止削弱人類嘅各方面嘅，唔單止削弱你嘅經濟啊、你嘅健康啊、你嘅壽數啊、你嘅知識啊，並且最重要嘅就係咧，佢如果發現咧削弱唔夠啊，即係藉着陰謀嘅呢一方面，藉着攞開我哋一啲健康嘅常識啊，攞開我哋一啲關於我哋能源資源上、經濟上嘅各樣嘅財富之外，佢覺得唔夠嘅話咧，佢就會製造好多我哋所講嘅戰爭啦。我哋都曾經講過啦，戰爭都又係嚟去，又係呢一班咁樣嘅製造陰謀嘅呢一班人去搞出嚟噶嘛。咁佢除咗製造戰爭之外，另外一樣嘢咧就製造災禍。其中一樣，我相信我哋呢一代當中，甚至延伸到下一代為禍嘅，我相信係我哋眼見喺之前所出現嘅311事件啦嚇。因為事實上咧，311咧呢件嘅事件咧，其實去到今時今日啦，啱啱Cliff High 佢喺10月23號咧，因為好多人嘅要求嘅緣故咧，佢就再出咗一份嘅 Webbob， 就唔係講將來關於預言啊，又或者係 Webbob 所講將會發生嘅嘢，因為真係如佢自己所講，真係呢個 Webbob 已經真係可以話死亡咗，都由4月到而家咧，都成大半年啦，都冇乜嘢出得到嚇。但係問題佢最主要咧就係因為好多人問佢啊，好多人問佢就係因為咩咧？就係因為去到而家咧，美國咧嘅東岸西岸咧都有極之多嘅輻射污染咧，係嚴重得好緊要啊！佢翻去自己都講啊，佢根本喺之前311之後，佢都成日都用街個 counter 就即係嗰啲度輻射嗰啲標啦，咁佢度住嗰個生活環境啦。佢話而家佢都唔開啦，佢話一開親咧，佢就真係覺得好大壓制，因為活喺一個咁大輻射嘅環境啊。咁好明顯啦，呢個就照住我哋喺2年前當件事發生嘅時候，我哋已經警告大家咧要留意嘅嘢啦。咁佢就錄咗1個鐘嘅時間咧，最主要係教人哋點樣去防輻射啊！就其實我哋都講過㗎啦。咁但係問題其中一樣當然啦，佢就講話絕對唔好食魚啦嚇，即係一定收工㗎啦，係咪？咁但係其實而家你會發覺咧呢一方面咧，我就值得再睇一睇，因為而家已經有好多嘅水手咧由日本咧坐船啦，即係喺航行當中由日本去美國啊嘛，佢都講緊咧，直情係2-3千海里啊嘅範圍當中咧，都見唔到以前咁大量嘅魚啊、海豚啊、海狗啊咁樣嘅咯，喺個行程當中，反而咧就見到好少量呢啲嘅動物，並且就算見到啲鯨魚咧，都係生 cancer 嘅，啲腫瘤喺晒背脊嘅。而家佢講緊係咁嘅現象啊！佢快都講緊咧，佢話根本佢哋而家東西岸嗰邊啲魚量咧係大幅度減少㗎嚇，而並且咧環境又好啦，啲食物又好啦，都係好多輻射污染嘅嚇。咁但係而家先至提，好多都好遲啦。而家係咪嗱？咁所以變咗其中一樣，感謝主啦，我哋又知道呢一啲嘅資訊啦。而其中一樣就好似我就提到就係話 Tom Hanks 都講啊，就係講我哋2009年嘅時候講，就係其實2012年10月1號咧，其實係開始7年大災難嘅第一年嚇。咁而事實上咧喺呢個光景當中，我哋將會按住聖經所講咧，其中一個印第4印咧，就地球甚至死1/4人口添嘅嚇，即係嗰個係饑荒啊、瘟疫啊、呢一啲嘅野獸嘅攻擊啊，導致1/4人口會死去喎。咁但係問題而家我哋睇見全球喺輻射污染嘅情況底下，輻射污染嘅洗禮情況底下咧，似乎咧我哋將要見到呢一個嘅慘劇咧去開始啦。
喺2011年3月11日，日本發生史上最猛烈嘅9級地震，觸發最高達40米嘅海嘯，瞬間波及日本東岸，宮城、岩手、青森、茨城同埋福島等農業鄉縣，溫室、農田同埋房屋都遭受到嚴重嘅摧殘，滿目瘡痍。海嘯亦都導致福島第一核電站、 出現世紀核子洩漏災害，大量本來用嚟冷卻核反應爐嘅海水，因為地震所造成嘅破壞而流入海洋，大量放射性物質亦都被釋入土地同埋大海。日本政府喺離核電廠30至到50公里嘅區域檢測出過高濃度嘅放射性銫，令人十分擔憂。但一直以嚟，各國政府同埋主流傳媒都輕忽呢次事件對海洋生態嘅影響，甚至民眾進食受輻射污染嘅海產食品所帶嚟健康上嚴重嘅影響。2011年12月4日出版嘅 Report 入邊，對全世界嘅7點預測嘅第1點當中，已經預測關於輻射毒害同埋人體疾病嘅關係。消息將會由好多非主流傳媒開始爆發出嚟，直至2013年7月22日，喺事故發生後嘅2年多，日本東京電力公司先至表示，核電廠內嘅放射性污水正係洩漏流入太平洋。但東電先前卻堅決否認呢個問題嘅存在。到咗8月20日，核電廠又發生相類嘅事件，多達300噸嘅高輻射濃度污水喺污水儲存槽往外泄。呢啲污水足以對附近工作員工嘅健康構成傷害。呢次污水外泄事故被評為國際核事件分級表上面嘅第3級。到咗8月24日，東電表示，導致福島第1核電廠蓄水罐儲存嘅放射性污水大量泄漏嘅原因係蓄水罐變形。喺先前，東電曾經用橡膠圈密封咗蓄水罐，防止蓄水罐變形。近日，橡膠圈可能因為老化而喪失功能。9月3日，經過2年多後，日本政府先至準備投入470億日元經費去阻止污水外泄，並且建設凍土牆同埋除污裝置。但究竟能唔能夠起作用，都係未知之數。9月19日，日本首相安倍晉三親自視察核電廠，並作出指示，除咗先前除役嘅4個反應爐之外，完好但係停機嘅第5、6號反應爐都應該報廢，專心處理污水問題。安倍話呢行嘅目的正係要親自見證。但以上嘅補救工作已經係事件發生2年半後，數以萬噸計受到輻射污染嘅高濃度海水，經已嚴重咁樣污染海洋。到咗2013年10月22日，按住 Report 所預測，網上非主流傳媒 Activist Post 公佈有關美國核事故應急中心嘅資料顯示，日本311事件嘅核輻射污染已經極嚴重咁樣影響美國本土同埋西岸沿岸海洋。美國全國各地輻射監測站嘅輻射水平不斷升高，每一日都有300噸放射性水從福島進入太平洋，並且逐步建立喺海洋嘅食物鏈入邊。圖中所見係美國本土嘅輻射監測站，輻射警報分5級，由1至5，5為最高警戒級別，深紅色嘅地方為4級，黃紅色為3級，黃黑色為2級，而黃綠色為1級安全等級。按資料顯示，可見整個美國西岸、部分東部同埋中部已經受到福島事件嘅明顯影響。不單如此，北美西岸嘅各種海洋生物都已經遭受到各種唔同程度嘅嚴重影響。例如，美國地質調查局喺一份聲明當中指出，沿住阿拉斯加海岸線嘅北極熊、海豹同埋海象正面對毛皮脫落同埋開放性潰瘍問題，疑似受到輻射感染嘅症狀。又例如喺2013年3月，設喺西雅圖嘅國家海洋漁業服務嘅野生動物生物學家沙龍梅林話，喺上年6月喺南加州海岸嘅島嶼聚居地，有 45% 嘅幼海獅出生之後就已經死亡。此外，喺2013年8月嘅報導指出，沿住太平洋沿岸嘅加拿大同埋阿拉斯加嘅海岸線，紅鮭魚嘅數目處於歷史低位，好多人都指責嗰個係福島輻射造成嘅影響。又喺2013年8月嘅報導指出，加拿大西岸因唔知名原因，令大量魚類嘅魚鰓、腹部同埋眼球流血，呢啲都係輻射感染嘅後遺症。再者，喺2013年3月，有報導指出，面積有如加州大小、受到核輻射污染嘅廢物已經從福島經太平洋漂流到美國西岸。 2013年5月22日嘅報導，專家亦都發現喺夏威夷同埋西岸之間嘅太平洋水域嘅浮游生物，佢嘅銫137處於非常高嘅水平。另外喺2012年5月，一個喺加州進行有關藍鰭吞拿魚嘅15個樣本，全部都含有嚟自福島嘅輻射。喺2012年1月，加拿大溫哥華《太陽報》指出，由日本出售到加拿大嘅食用魚入邊，極高比例帶有銫137輻射，包括73% 嘅青魚、91% 嘅比目魚、92% 嘅沙甸魚、93% 嘅吞拿魚同埋鰻魚、94% 嘅鱈魚同埋鳳尾魚、100% 嘅鯉魚、海帶、鯊魚同埋安康魚。喺2013年10月嘅報導指出，加拿大當局發現某些魚類樣本嘅核輻射極高，佢哋身體嘅輻射水平亦都非常高。喺2013年7月收集嘅鱸魚樣品入邊，就發現每公斤達到1000貝可釋。喺2013年9月，加州聖克魯斯大學嘅核政策講師丹尼爾·克希指出，我哋將會見到大量因為進食美洲西岸受到輻射感染嘅魚類而患癌嘅人口上升。喺2013年8月，有報道指出輻射已經污染咗整個太平洋。喺2013年9月1日，環保活動家喬馬蒂諾因為福島事故而發出以下警告：進食太平洋海產嘅日子已經完結啦。喺2013年7月，有報道指出福島事件對太平洋所產生嘅污染已經比上世紀因為核爆試驗所帶嚟嘅核污染高出5至到10倍。喺2013年8月，有報道指出，美國加州沿海岸嘅海灣因為福島事件已經變成死亡地帶。更可怕嘅係，以上種種有關核污染極嚴重嘅報導，大多數都係由非主流傳媒所報導嘅。更遑論可以從香港嘅傳媒口中聽得到咁重要嘅資訊，可見又再次應驗咗 Webbot 早前嘅預測。日華牧師早喺2011年6月播放嘅錫安教會全職講座上邊，提醒教會弟兄姊妹防備，唔好再進食海產類嘅食品，因為已經可能受到輻射污染。到今年2013年10月23日 ，Webbot 嘅負責人 Cliff 再次喺佢嘅錄音訊息入邊提到有關輻射污染。事實上，美國本土無論陸地定係海洋，都遭受嚴重嘅輻射污染。佢哋而家最關心嘅問題係點樣從身體當中排出輻射污染物，從而減少輻射對身體嘅影響。此外，早於2012年9月23日，2012榮耀盼望第137篇主日訊息當中，日華牧師曾經介紹過一啲數萬元嘅專業輻射測量儀器 Geiger Counter， 可以用嚟檢測環境、雨水、食水同埋食物嘅輻射水平。至於普通數百元至到1000多元嘅輻射測量儀器，一般只能夠檢測環境同埋空氣嘅輻射水平，未能夠測出食物或者海產入邊存有放射性輻射物質嘅含量。故此，呢啲價值1000多元嘅輻射測量儀器，最多只能顯示環境同埋空氣存有輻射，所以呢個環境屬於危險，但係唔能夠證實食物入邊冇輻射物質，而斷定呢啲食物可以安全食用。尤其係而家好多海產類食物存有嘅銫137放射性輻射物質，連極微量都唔能夠存喺人體，因為就算係一丁點嘅銫137放射性輻射物質，已經足以對人體造成嚴重影響。另一方面，可能你有所不知，大麻係最能夠吸收環境輻射污染物嘅植物。當將大麻種植喺受核輻射物污染嘅土地上嘅時候，由於大麻係最強吸收重金屬嘅植物，而大部分最長半衰期嘅核輻射污染物，例如銫、鍶、鈾同埋鈽等嘅元素，都係重金屬。種植大麻就可以將滲入泥土入邊嘅輻射物去除。喺1998年，由烏克蘭麻類作物研究所同埋美國嘅綜合種植者和處理器，加上美國嘅環境生物科技研究公司嘅共同研究指出，大麻係最好嘅生物修復植物。種植工業能夠用嚟修復受到切爾諾貝爾核電廠所洩漏嘅核輻射污染物污染。喺過去嘅幾十年，大麻 係解決核輻射污染嘅最重要方法，可以藉住種植大麻將土地嘅核污染物去除。但因着大麻被禁止使用同埋種植，令人類失去咗一種極寶貴嘅資源。
但係感謝主，我哋值得要留意一樣嘢咧，就係點解我哋啊，即係喺世界上咁少人知道呢一啲事情。而家譬如好似好啦，而家 Red Bob 呢個時候10月23號所講嘅話啊，有呢啲嘅輻射啊，我哋要用好多方法去防呢啲輻射啊。但係佢而家講嘅時候，我哋已經係早2年已經知嘅喎，係咪？早2年已經大家我哋習慣上已經唔食海鮮，係咪？其實我哋要深知道神點解唔講俾其他人聽，係講俾我哋聽。原因就係我哋尊重神嘅帶領，尊重神嘅話，尊重神嘅聖靈所俾我哋嘅感動。明唔明啊，弟兄姊妹？我哋而家越嚟越明白，而家我哋所知嘅嘢咧，係神去俾我哋知嘅，係咪？而事實上，我想你知道將來唔尊重神嘅話，唔尊重神嘅帶領嘅人，連毛衣人啊都做唔到啊！唔好講話咧，做毛衣人嘅師傅，係咪？所以我想喺呢度特別再提一提，就係話，其實而家你所聽嘅呢啲信息咧，你要珍而重之啊！因為呢一啲係嚟自咧呢間教會嘅牧師，就係我啦，同埋我身邊嘅啲領袖，係極之尊重神所俾我哋嘅帶領同埋信息。而現時我哋睇見呢個真係神所俾我哋嘅預言，係早過世界上可以話咧絕大部分嘅人去知道。而有啲甚至係神特登唔俾佢哋知嘅，因為佢哋會唔會尊重呢啲神嘅話？會唔會尊重神呢一個時代當中所俾類似但以理、類似約瑟呢一種秘密嘅揭示者，能夠真係知道呢啲嘅奧秘同埋智慧啊？嗰啲人唔尊重，佢哋聽到都唔尊重啊！唔好話根本未聽嘅時候，神有機會想感動佢哋，係咪？所以弟兄姊妹去到呢個時刻，我哋越發鄭重我哋所聽見嘅，而並且越發尊重神所俾我哋嘅帶領，無論佢俾呢間教會嘅帶領又好，或者俾我哋個人嘅帶領都好。而事實上嚟緊日子咧，因為我哋呢份嘅尊重咧，唔單止神所俾我哋嘅保護，並且會俾呢份嘅恩膏咧，讓我哋成為普世好多有需要嘅人咧嘅帶領嘅。好啦，咁最尾咧，我想每一個人都同3個人講，我會越發尊重神嘅帶領嘅。Amen。感謝主。好，咁最尾咧，我哋學到任何嘢咧，我哋一齊歡呼鼓掌，多謝神啦！感謝主。好。